Good evening, everyone. We're opening tonight's City Council meeting with the public comment period. I just wanted to bring up one item. Earlier today, we added something that was inadvertently left off to our rules of decorum. One of those is that if an item is scheduled for public hearing, comments about that item must be made during the public hearing and not during public comment. So if anybody is here to speak on a public hearing matter, we ask that you do that. There's reasons for that. Specifically, our code calls for equal time and notice. And if anybody has any questions, the city attorney can brief them. But we are going to start the evening hearing from Brian Bratty. Three minutes per person.
Good evening. My name is Brian Bratty, and I live at 1316 Trailer Rose Court in Wake Forest. I'm here tonight to glorify Christ and to speak truth to you in hopes that it exposes the evil that is ongoing today and has been through abortion in the city of Raleigh. The founders of the United States, men like John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, and Benjamin Franklin, believed that history was the most important subject for all citizens of a free republic to study. They believed that the purpose of studying history was to make us better as individuals, better as citizens of a free republic. The study of history has a moral purpose. Unfortunately, as a society, we do not think historically. We do not use the lessons of the past to make decisions in the present and plan for the future. Therefore, we continue to make mistakes. One of those examples is Roe versus Wade. Roe versus Wade is the 20th century equivalent of Dred Scott versus Sanford. The infamous decision holding that slaves and their descendants were not and could not be citizens of any American state for purposes of the Constitution. Conceptually, the Roe abortion rule is like slavery. It dehumanizes and treats as chattel a whole class of humanity. As Dred Scott held that blacks are not persons entitled to constitutional protection, so Roe holds that unborn humans are not entitled to basic constitutional protection for their lives. As the court in Dred Scott said that black slaves are merely the property of their owners, so Roe says that an unborn human being is merely property belonging to her pregnant mother, which the woman can dispose of as she wishes. If, as Abraham Lincoln said at Cooper's Union, the message of slavery is that a man is not a man if he is black, the core message of Roe is that a human being is not a human being if it is in the womb. In Roe, the Supreme Court constitutionalized private violence. Abortion is the most violent act one human can commit against another by killing them. The primary direct victims of abortion are the most voiceless, vulnerable class of human beings. By doing nothing, you yourselves are allowing history to repeat itself because of a ridiculous court opinion, just like in 1857. The Bible clearly teaches us about the history of our sinful nature as a human race that never changes apart from Christ. Our sinful nature as human beings is the same today as it was then. History has shown that our sinful nature causes us to lust for power and greed in doing as we oppress our neighbor, the child in the womb. History has shown that mankind is lovers of themselves, hater of God, deceived, enslaved to various lusts and pleasures, hating one another and not loving their neighbors, being darkened in their understanding, excluded from the life of God because of the ignorance that it is in us and our hardness of heart. All things that I once was, where I was once blind, but now I can see because of the love of Jesus. Christ is the only way. He is God in the flesh, and his divine nature is opposite man's. Jesus emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men and being found in human form. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. This is our example in loving others. We are asking you to love your neighbor, the child in the womb, as Christ loved us. Stop allowing the oppression and murder of these children. Repent and believe the gospel and make Raleigh a sanctuary city.
So we have 35 people signed up tonight. I'm going to read out 5 names, and if you would line up over on that side there, and then we can move things along more efficiently. So every 5 names that I call, Mary Jo Gallagher will be next, Gabriel Papalardo, Marty Dulberg, Theresa Turner, and Gavin O'Melia. So if we could just be ready to go, and then I will call out the next 5 names.
Thank you. My name is Mary Jo Gallagher. I live at 2206 Creston Road. I'm a proud member of Oaks and Spokes. I love my Citrix Cycle membership, and I really value my Go Triangle Transit card, which I use for the majority of my travels around town, like tonight. First, I want to thank you all for being our representatives. I really appreciate what you guys do. I'm here to talk about the relationship between transportation and climate change and how the two of them are connected, to inspire our political will, to find funding and build a network of protected pathways for bike riders, micromobility users, and walkers. Transportation and climate change are related because transportation is the largest polluter of greenhouse gases. And inside that industry, the largest polluter of them all are private vehicles. And I'm not talking about one vehicle, but the collected masses of them together. So why is that important for us to know? Because our governor in 2018 signed Executive Order number 80 that directs our state to lower its greenhouse gas levels by the year 2025, which is only 5 years away, to lower them by 40%. Is it possible? I believe it is. I recently posted a strategy that was retweeted by NCDOT and North Carolina Secretary of Transportation's Twitter accounts. In it, I wrote, invest in electric vehicles that are shared with the public, and invest in protected pathways to connect the public safely to those zero-emission vehicles. That is the strategy to lower our greenhouse gas levels quickly. The majority of our transportation budget is spent on expanding roads and highways. The belief is that this will reduce traffic congestion, but the opposite is true. Data has shown that it actually increases car volume and congestion returns. I can also share that as a walker and a bike rider here in Raleigh, it's scary and it's life-threatening. I believe that we have the political will in our city council that will be backed by our state government to fund and build that protected pathway that we need. We can lower our greenhouse gas levels inside 5 years with low-cost infrastructure that reduces our car dependency, and data proves it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mary Jo. Gabriel Pappalardo.
Thank you.
Okay.
Madam Mayor,
Welcome.
members of the city, thank you. Members of the City Council, thank you so much for your time. I reside at 123 Ash Avenue right here in Raleigh. I've lived in the Triangle my whole life, Cary High, NC State. I only left this area one time, and that was because I had a profound psychological crash. I was deeply depressed, borderline suicidal. I decided to throw everything out, and I moved to a yoga ashram, which is a strange thing, but it's an intentional community where everyone commits to live the principles of yoga to find inner peace. The reason I bring this up is because it was maybe the meditation, maybe the stretching, these things helped. But what I found actually really helped my well-being was the actual physical structures of this intentional community were all designed in a way that fostered connection and well-being. So what do I mean by that? Living here in the Triangle, you may be one of 80 or 100 people living in an apartment building. You all live by yourself in isolation, your doors are closed, you don't know your neighbors. It's highly inefficient. You all have your fridges, although they may be empty because you don't have time to go food shopping. You may have ovens, but you don't use them because you don't have time to cook for yourself. We all have sinks where the dishes pile up and floors where the clothes pile, but we don't have time to take care of ourselves. Whereas at Yogaville, instead, after I came in from working on the farm, I walked into a communal dining hall where there was food that was nutritious and delicious and waiting for me. And about twice a month, I would work in the kitchen and provide food to the others in my community. At other times, I might work in the kitchen to help clean, but instead of using inefficient devices procured on my own, I was using efficient state-of-the-art equipment, following a checklist, and working on a crew where I was meeting the people in my community and forming connection and meaning, and also being highly more efficient in how I was using my time and supporting myself and the people around me. As we are growing as fast as we are here in the Triangle, we're all trying to figure out how do we do higher density with affordability, sustainability, and I think that I would like to invite the City Council to consider in developmental proposals challenging developers to think about an intentional community approach and how that they design things. Imagine if a floor or two on one of these high rises had more of a communal structure to it. I think that this would be something that would check boxes for affordability, sustainability, but I also think that there is it's a highly marketable way of life. So I think that there's a business case to be made as well. There are people at Duke University doing research on this. There are people in our community excited about this topic. If I've captured your imagination at all, please reach out. I'd love to make some introductions. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank you for coming up and sharing your very deeply personal story. It is much appreciated. Thank you. And you did kind of capture my imagination, so thank you. Next, we have Marty Dolborg.
Yes, hi, my name is Marty Delberg, 3413 Cherry Lane, and thank you, Mayor and council members, for allowing me to address you. I had a question, and that is, why do we allow non-residents to come and engage in the public comment period of these meetings? It seems to me that for matters that are not before the City Council, I understand that we have a cooperative relationship with all of the towns around us. This is a large municipal area that's not just Raleigh. But I don't understand why we're allowing people to monopolize the time of these meetings, to drag them out for things that do not really relate to Raleigh. So I would like to suggest simply that the rules are changed to only allow non-residents to come speak about matters that are before the City Council. And that's it.
Thank you. The city attorney can address that. If you would address that, please.
Oh, right now? I think that it would
Quick
be...
on our feet these days, come on.
Yeah. We've looked at it. I think it would be problematic on a number of, for a number of reasons. We have zoning jurisdiction that expands outside the city. We have people who work in the city and don't live in the city, people who, do all sorts of things, and just residency alone is not something that we can stop someone from speaking about. As far as weighing the topic, I think that comes into the content of speech, and this is a forum that is really open to things, to give an opportunity where you don't have another, forum to speak your mind. And it could be that it's questionable whether it's city interest or not, but I think that, that's not something that we're in a position to do legally as many interests that we have for people who don't live here.
Thank you. Theresa Turner is next, and then Gavin O'Melia.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Theresa Turner at 1004 Cookwood Court in Raleigh. I am here to enlist protection of my First Amendment rights and to declare Raleigh a sanctuary for the unborn. My people are dying at an alarming rate, and at times we are being prevented from declaring the truth. To give some background as to why I'm here, it was one voice that urged me to keep my baby when all of the other voices around me said the opposite. But that baby by age 4 was asking to donate his own Christmas gifts to a child less fortunate, which he continued to do so each year. That baby received 6 different academic achievement awards at his high school senior day and graduated with honors from North Carolina State University. That baby is now a tax-paying registered voter who may have even helped elect one of you. Whatever that baby accomplishes in his life, it all began with one voice. And that's why I want to use my voice at a Women's Choice of Raleigh. And my voice, my assembly, has been disrupted on several occasions. I used my voice with assembled voices to sing one day, and this paid escort used a loudspeaker to drown out singing and performed a lewd dance to a song called Another One Bites the Dust, while dozens of other women, 70% of them who looked like me, were waiting inside to abort babies that looked like mine. In another example, a woman who was waiting inside the clinic came outside down to the curb to talk to me one-on-one. A paid escort left the parking lot, walked across the lawn to the opposite end, and proceeded to interrupt me, to cut me off, and disrupt the conversation, even though this woman never asked or indicated that she needed any assistance. In a third example, I used my voice at the clinic to talk about saving legacies. That particular day, about 3 or 4 patients walked outside of the front door of the clinic and stood on the front stoop to listen. You can tell that they were trying to listen intently. And the paid escorts again left the parking lot, went up to where they were standing and herded them aggressively inside before returning and turning on a loudspeaker to drown out anything that I was trying to say. These incidents are so frequent that it led me to the conclusion that the paid escort's job is not to save women from me, but is to drown out and disrupt my voice and to keep my peaceful assembly and the information and the truth about our resources from being heard. So I'm asking you, people who my baby or I could have voted for, to now protect my voice and the voices of future voters of this city by declaring Raleigh a sanctuary city for the unborn.
So, before we continue, I'm going to ask everybody the rules of decorum. Ask no jeering, but also no clapping. So if we could just kind of keep it quiet and be respectful, that would be much appreciated. Thank you. Sir?
My name is Gavin O'Melia, and I live at 8013 Lakeshore Drive. Monday, January 27th, marked the 75th anniversary of Auschwitz, a concentration camp. All across Europe, people were arrested based on religion or based on being what was deemed an inferior race. They were crammed into freight cars, taken to Auschwitz. There they were starved, brutally beaten, and forced to do hard labor for up to 12 hours a day. But that wasn't all. Up to 700 could be killed at once in just one of the many gas chambers. Anyone who wouldn't go in was shot or torn apart by dogs. Once dead, their valuables such as gold teeth or jewelry would be removed, their hair would be shaved and sold, and then their corpses were burned. 1.1 million people, mostly Jews, were murdered in Auschwitz alone. And although wrong, what happened at Auschwitz was perfectly legal. Just like the murder of Jews by the Nazis, abortion is murder, and it is the duty of you, as the city council, to make it illegal here in Raleigh. Although legal, abortion is murder. Where Auschwitz killed 1.1 million, abortion has killed over 60. They've killed babies based on race or based on the fact that they have a disability such as Down syndrome. If the baby is young enough, then like the gas chambers, the babies are scarred and burned to death by deadly chemicals. Another option is to have the baby sucked out by vacuum. If the baby is too big for these procedures, then the baby's limbs are ripped from its body, its head is crushed, and then it is torn from its mother's womb. Just like the Holocaust, abortion murders human beings. And it is the duty of you as the city council to make it illegal in Raleigh. One survivor of Auschwitz, Ellie Wiesel, said that the opposite of love is not hate, it is indifference. So when I look back on the Holocaust, I wonder how it could have happened. How could all those citizens of Europe have just stood by and watched as their neighbors were carted off to concentration camps? But then I look at our culture, and I see the same thing. Over 60 million babies have been killed, yet you sit here indifferent. Regardless of an erroneous Supreme Court ruling, it is your duty to protect your citizens. Allowing abortion isn't just allowing the murder of babies, it is also a sin against our Creator God. And the penalty for sin is death. But because of our sin, God took on flesh, and he lived the perfect life that we failed to live, and then he died the death that we rightfully deserved. And then he rose again, conquering death. And if you repent of your sins and believe in him, you can have eternal life. Please criminalize abortion now.
Next, we have Curtis Johnson, Heather Keefer, Rolando Bird, Jacob Olsen, and Christy Jackson. If you could line up on front here, ready to speak.
Good evening, Council. I'm Curtis Johnson, address 1311 Bethel Road here in Raleigh. I stand before you tonight 2 years later because I had an incident in my house, and at the time it was 1002 South Blunt Street, downtown Raleigh. And I called the police to my house to trespass a young lady away from my property. They did so, and we signed the pink trespass paper. And then she returned, kicked my window in, climbed through my window, and then I called them back, and then they arrested me for false police report or something. But what I was asking the city of Raleigh for, then I went to Turner Affairs, was something on the city's letterhead just stating whether or not the police officers abused their power and authority and obstructed justice by, when they came back, they not only took me to jail, but they put this young lady in the police car and took her to Spring Forest Road. Now, I'm not a police officer, and I'm not here to say all police officers are bad in Raleigh, because I know one or a couple of Officer Lane is a great officer, and I'm sure there are many more. But what I am saying is I just need something in writing on the city's letterhead just telling me, explaining whether or not these officers follow the policy and procedure of the police department. Because me being a landlord, I have signed pink trespassing forms against people, and then the police come back to that property and the people were there and they were arrested and went straight to jail. So I know that these officers obstructed justice because this lady never had her day in court. You know, whether they took me to jail for whatever reasons, this lady still was supposed to due process and have her day in court to answer those charges. And all I have is a letter from the police department 2 years later stating how many times that came to my residence, which I didn't know there was a quota on how many times you could call the police if you needed them. But nevertheless, that's all this letter states. And I'm just asking the city manager, and I'm sure you have a process and procedure, and get with the city attorney and have something on letterhead so that I can proceed with my case in this matter. Thanks, and that's all I have. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Heather Keefer.
Good evening. I'm Heather Keefer, Executive Director at Wake Up Wake County. Our office is located at 16 West Martin Street, Raleigh, North Carolina, 27601, Suite 904. Tonight, I'd like to speak to you on the importance of supporting investments in protected bike lanes and more walkable pedestrian access, and highlight the need for greenway connections throughout downtown and throughout the city. Encouraging more bike lanes and walkable communities is something that Wake Up has focused a lot of attention on and will continue to focus on over the next year. As implementation of the 2016 Wake Transit Plan rolls out, we need to address the first mile, last mile problem to ensure that all investments in transit pay off. For example, the BRT is projected to match the downtown north-south connector, having both good, reliable transit and safe, protected bicycle access will help connect communities to all parts of the city and county. But at present, concerns about safety is a major barrier to more people biking and walking in our communities with lack of safe bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. An Elon University poll from last year found that 2/3 of North Carolinians feel unsafe when walking along the roads without sidewalk. In June of 2019, Wake Up published a blog post on bicycle and pedestrian crash data in Wake County. The data showed that bicyclists and pedestrian motor vehicle crashes are on the rise in Wake County. Moreover, an average of roughly one bicyclist or pedestrian is struck by a motor vehicle in Wake County each day. In Raleigh, there was over 3,000 bicycle and pedestrian crashes between 2007 and 2016. About 9% of all of those crashes resulted in death or disabling injury. As this community that strives to be a leader in the county and state, we should be doing everything possible to encourage greater levels of active transportation. Biking and walking show important health, economic, and environmental benefits and are key indicators for social determinants of health. Improving bicycle and pedestrian safety will also help mitigate the effects of climate change and help us play a vital role as a global partner. Transportation is the largest source of planet-warming greenhouse gases, and most of those emissions come from driving around our cities. Investments in safe and protected bicycle pedestrian access will allow residents to confidently reduce driving and help us meet our 2050 goal. We support implementation of Raleigh's complete street policies and investment in and focused on bicyclist and pedestrian safety. We also recommend that you consider the city becoming a Vision Zero community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Rolando Bird.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Rolando Bird, 6156 St. Giles Street. Thank you for taking the first step to giving Raleigh a community review board. While I am completely unhappy with the type of board approved and how the proposal given by Raleigh Pat was completely disregarded, even after being accepted by the HRC, with new leadership in this council and the HRC, we acknowledge change. I feel the first step should have shown our community that their lives and safety are just as important as the people that are put in place to protect and serve our community. I feel that you held the power in your hand and were afraid to take a leap instead of a step into setting a greatly needed higher expectation of accountability for the people you allow to patrol our streets with weapons and tools of their choice to use or not to use. I am a leader in my community, and I think I speak for people who look like me and live like me, and I am saying that I believe that you have again dropped the ball and settled for generic baloney when you could have had boar's head. I started this request for a community oversight board with subpoena power, investigatory power, and disciplinary power 3 years ago. Giving us this illusionary board will not stop us from continuing to come here with requests for changes in your policies that clearly show favorable bias for the men in blue and not the people who hold your jobs in their vote. I cannot with a whole heart call this a win for the city of Raleigh because, again, you've left out the powers needed to truly protect the citizens and show complete transparency in this process. I would like to meet with each of you individually to see how we can work together to figure this relationship out between community and policing. We don't need boards for show. We need power, hoping for a greater concern from our elected officials and the lives and livelihood of the people that you are all here to serve. And I hope to leave here today with a new nickname from you guys, not as an angry black woman, but as a mother who lost a child to police excessive use of force that has bravely fought a fight against all odds, as many of us do on a day-to-day basis, and wants to see true change in her community on police reform.
What's the nickname? Okay. Rolando, I want to thank you. You've worked on this for 3 years, and we do understand you're disappointed, but please give us some time to work with you. And I also appreciate you reaching out and saying you'd like to meet with us anytime. Okay. Jacob Olsen.
Hey, hi everybody.
Name and address for the record, please.
Jacob Olsen, 1608 Honeysuckle Road. All right. Hi, my name is Jacob Olsen. I'm a North Carolina native, and I own a food cart business that serves lunch on Fayetteville Street. I'm here today proposing that we increase the maximum allowed height of a push cart from 6 feet to 8 feet. The reason is because I'm 6.5 feet tall. When it is very windy and cold outside, it's very hard to do business. Fayetteville Street's like a wind tunnel. I'm sure everybody's been down there. I found an enclosed push cart that is very neat and would keep me warm. I spoke with Rebecca Robbins, who is in charge of Wake County approvals, and she will approve the cart. She just wants to make sure I can put it downtown. Also, I spoke with Robert Pierce, who is a zoning code enforcement supervisor for the city of Raleigh, and he noticed that the cart was over 6 feet tall. Mr. Pierce advised me of this city council process and wished me good luck. He said that I am a professional chef that trained at Johnson & Wales University in Denver, Colorado. I have almost 15 years of hospitality industry experience. I promise to keep the cart clean and respect the city and county regulations. In closing, many of my customers work downtown. I get a lot of feedback about the lunch choices downtown. Many people want a less expensive lunch option. They want good value for their money. Most cannot afford more than $10 at lunch, and even that is stretching it. I want Olsen's to be a reliable and consistent lunch option for the hardworking people of downtown Raleigh. I spoke with several of my customers and can furnish petition signatures and character witnesses to vouch for my business. I want to feed the customers and provide for my family. I do not want to get sick while I am serving people and making a living for my family. And please consider my proposal to increase the height allowed from 6 feet to 8 feet. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Jacob, and thank you for a few moments of comic relief. Appreciate it. I'm going to ask the city manager, could you have staff look at this and come back and report back to us at council?
Yes, and as someone who's 6'2", I'm sympathetic to your situation. So staff has worked with Mr. Olsen. He's been very good to work with us, and you have a public use, private use in public space set of ordinances. It's called the PUPS ordinance. And so what I would suggest is that you would give us guidance to look at the PUPS ordinance, make any changes that are necessary, and bring that back to you. And I believe then we can address the concern.
You have that.
So without
Direction.
maybe without objection, we will work through that. We'll bring something back, maybe even put it on consent, and try to work through that. How's that sound?
Everybody good with that? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
So
you all.
we'll be in touch with, staff will follow up with you on the
Thank
next
you. You're
steps.
all invited to come get a hot dog. Thank you.
Right.
Your child.
You still need to pay for it, however.
Hi, Christy.
Hi, Christy Jackson, 1617 East Martin, 5'6".
Okay, new rule. Everyone who comes up tonight has to say how tall they are.
It's good to provide a little comic relief because what I'm going to say has no comedy.
I know.
Apologize. Council, thank you. I want to ask you to please take bicycle and pedestrian safety very seriously. I stand here before you because I am a survivor of vehicle violence. I want to read this because it'll be easier for me.
Take a breath.
I might not be able to do this.
Can you stop the time? Okay.
Okay. On Friday, January 16th of 2015 is the day that I started my second life. I did not make it into work that morning. As I bicycled on Milburnie Road, a driver struck my back wheel. The force of the impact with the ground broke my arm. I lay in the intersection of Raleigh Boulevard for 2 signal cycles until I could gain the strength to pull myself from the turn lane, run limping across 2 lanes of traffic on Raleigh Boulevard, and dive into the grass beside the roadway. The driver who hit me did not stay on the scene. I will always remember how many light cycles changed that day and how nobody stopped on their morning commute to help me. On Wednesday, May 3rd, 2017 is the day that I started my third life. I did not make it into work that morning. I was lying bleeding in the intersection of Jones and Sewell Avenue. I sustained severe injuries. I am the statistic that they talk about. The driver ran a stop sign. He probably felt something on his wheels, and he got out of his truck and he found me instead. He immediately tried to start excusing himself from the scene because nobody wants to be that person. Witnesses were trying to unsee what they saw. They were yelling, "Y'all good? Y'all good?" And I was not good. I repeatedly yelled for the driver and the witnesses to dial 911. I repeatedly yelled. They eventually did. I was very fortunate to be conscious because the rear wheel of the truck drove over my head. I could not move, and my upper body could not move. So I politely asked the driver if he would pull the skirt down over my body because I had worn a skirt to work that day. I had a broken arm, a broken hand, a large puncture wound, and I required stitches. And there was a lot of blood. I kissed my husband goodbye that morning. We have a really different relationship now that has happened. I will always remember how many times I asked the driver to dial 911. Give traffic safety serious consideration, and the connected and protected thing is a very serious issue. Thank you.
Christy, thank you for being here, and sorry. And yes, we will give that serious consideration. Calla Wright, Harry Johnson, Cody Stokes, Stephen Burt, and Bryan Thomas.
Good evening. I'm Calla Wright, 613 Cooper Road, Raleigh. I'm here today to discuss the ongoing issue of gentrification, reused water tower, resident safety. As you know, the reused water tower adjoins my property on 613 Cooper Road. I am wondering why the city did not give significant consideration to the impact that the tower would cause on my personal property. The city did not make any attempt to minimize the impact or the damage on my property, and I am not able to even consider creating or adding on any additions to my house because of the property lawn damage. I wonder how can elected officials allow this tower to be constructed in a neighborhood that have gravely impact not only my land, which will prohibit use of my backyard, but to my neighbors' lawns as well. And we are taxpayers and voters. However, we seem to always get the short end of the stick when it comes to the growth in the city of Raleigh. We tend to always have to bear the brunt. And it is time for you to make sure that you understand that we are taxpayers and voters. And my issue regarding my property damage and the use that I cannot use it needs to be addressed by the city. Secondly, I need to make sure that you all are aware that the recent shooting on Cooper Road, that there needs to be more involvement from police officers. They need to come into the neighborhood, make sure that they know the residents, that they develop relationships, and we're asking for a meeting with the chief of police to discuss our safety issues in Southeast Raleigh. Perhaps a hub or something could be built. And lastly, this is Black History Month. This is Southeast Raleigh, the Jim Crow era. You need to make sure you see how the citizens have been treated. We have grown as a city. However, the black people in our Southeast Raleigh continue to bear the brunt of the loss of land, of not having a place to live, they're living in rooming houses, and it's about accountability. If we can live together and be united on a common good, we have to work together to make sure everybody benefits from the growth, not just a small segment of the community, but people who are working at McDonald's, who do the hard work, hard labor, have access to the same living conditions and high quality of life as the others. And so until we get that issue, I will be up here talking about that issue. And when you make those decisions, you need to be cognizant that we were forced to live here because of segregation and the Jim Crow South. And to the officials, you need to make sure that you're aware you're to serve the public, not a segment of the population, but all of the citizens, from the least to the greatest. Until we get that issue embedded in our minds, I will continue to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Calla. Can we get a report in the city manager's report, a memo on the water reuse tower?
Yes, we can do that.
That issue. Okay, thank you. Harry Johnson? Is Harry not here? Okay. Cody Stokes?
Good evening. My name is Cody Stokes. I'm the president of Oaks and Spokes. My address is 6913 Brook Ridge Court. I'm 5'7". Oaks and Spokes is a nonprofit organization which fosters the community of people who ride bikes in Raleigh. Several of our members have come to City Council today to talk with you about our vision for a more bikeable Raleigh, and I want to contextualize these statements with a word about why this topic is so important and why it touches on so much of the city of Raleigh's current issues of urgency. Cycling is an intersectional activity. Every bike trip taken for transportation is one fewer car on the road, creating traffic congestion, taking another parking spot, and contributing to greenhouse gas emissions. It's far cheaper to own and maintain a car. Sorry, let me start that over. It's far cheaper to own and maintain a bike than a car, making it a favorite option for Raleigh's lower income residents and people who prefer to simplify their lives. Biking improves cardiovascular health, reduces stress, gets people outside, and encourages the development of one's own personal network. For some, it's a first choice of mobility and a way of life. For others, it's a last mile choice for users of Raleigh's growing transportation network, including the bus rapid transit system. But in order for Raleigh to reap the massive opportunities that cycling brings, we need to think big. Oaks and Spokes advocates for dedicated funding, research, and implementation of a connected and protected bicycle network. Our vision for Raleigh is a city in which all neighborhoods, residential and commercial, are safely and densely connected to one another, in which families are comfortable letting their kids ride alone to school, in which residents don't have to be in prime athletic shape to feel comfortable using their bike to commute to work, do their shopping, and run errands or visit friends. In short, it is a Raleigh in which cycling is a safe and enjoyable option, open to every person regardless of their age, gender identity, income, privilege, or ability. City Council holds the responsibility to take key steps forward towards this vision. Thank you.
Thank you, Cody. Stephen Burt.
Would it be possible to pull up a presentation?
I'm sorry?
Great. No, already beat me to the punches. I just was hoping to pull up this presentation.
Okay.
My name is Steve Burt. I live at 124 Field Spring Lane here in Raleigh, and I appreciate the time to speak with all of you tonight. I'm here to talk about a critical missing link in our sidewalk network here in my neighborhood. It's on Jones Franklin Road between Van Street and Athens Drive. And let me just figure out, okay. This is not a typical missing link. I think this is a highly trafficked corridor as well as a highly walked corridor. So being able to complete that link is very important. There are 3 apartment complexes and about a dozen homes that are all directly impacted from this missing link, which encompasses about 200 individuals in my neighborhood. And if you don't mind taking a look at the screen, there is a dotted orange line that indicates the 500 feet of missing sidewalk. To the north and to the south, there is sidewalk. But in that link itself, it's very dangerous. During peak traffic, that can sometimes get bumper to bumper, and even in off-peak, there's always cars moving through there. There's a Go Raleigh bus stop right in the location of the missing link, and there's also a school bus drop-off and pickup in near vicinity to that missing link. If you go to the north, people often walk to Harris Teeter or restaurants, and if you head south, people walk to Gabe Mart or even over to the community library on Athens Drive. And this isn't just a personal issue of mine. I also think this is an environmental justice issue for the city of Raleigh. If you take a look at the blue areas on the map, these signify a confluence of low income and high prevalence of minority population, both in the same blue swath. And if you take a look at that blue pinpoint, that's on the outer perimeter of, that's Jones Franklin Road, or the outer perimeter of that environmental justice area. The sidewalk has been brought to the attention of the city of Raleigh. A public official mentioned on See-Click Fix that they've been asked on numerous occasions to improve the sidewalk. It's also on the pedestrian priority list. However, it's not included in the FY20 to 2024 capital improvement plan. With that being said, there are options available to fund this project. I used NCDOT's sidewalk estimator cost tool and the sidewalk has an estimated cost of about $20,000. In the street maintenance and continuous improvements section of the budget, there's about $1.7 million available. And in the neighborhood connections and enhancements pot of funds available, pot of funds, there's about $850,000 available. So all I would ask, this is a high priority for me and my neighborhood. And if there's anything I can do to follow up to make this a possibility as soon as possible, truly is a safety issue.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Martin, you're my representative.
Thank you, sir. You've run out of your 3 minutes, but I'm going to ask staff, can you look into this and bring this back to council?
Yeah, we'll put a staff report in the manager's update for you.
Okay. Thank you. All right, next 5.
Madam Mayor, I also want to mention there's also a citizens petition process for sidewalks. I don't know if that's been sent to you, but it's on the city website.
Yeah.
We'll
have
also
them
follow up.
Yeah.
Staff.
Bryan Thomas, Queen Hargrove, Octavia Rainey, Will Hooker, Peter Boyer, and Alex Brissett. I'm sorry, Bryan Thomas already spoke.
No,
that was
not
just
yet.
Bryan.
Brian's here.
Yeah. Oh, there you are. Okay.
I'm 7 feet tall, by the way. Hello. My name is Bryan Thomas. I live at 1121 Harper Road. I've been a Raleigh resident for more than 25 years and a bike commuter for the past 12 years. Raleigh does so many things well that it's honestly hard to believe how far behind we are when it comes to safe infrastructure for bike transportation. Raleigh is not on Bicycling Magazine's list of top 50 U.S. cities for biking. Yet cities like Louisville, Memphis, Richmond, and Chattanooga are all on that list. In 2019, the national organization People for Bikes gave Raleigh 1.5 stars out of 5 for bikeability. Meanwhile, down the road, Durham got 2.7 stars. Raleigh has held a bronze designation from the League of American Bicyclists for 10 plus years. In 2016, we set a goal of reaching silver status by 2019. Unfortunately, that goal was not achieved. It wasn't achieved because in almost 2 decades, we haven't significantly increased ridership, which is the percentage of people who commute by bike. The 2000 census put our ridership at 0.3%, and in 2019, the League of American Bicyclists calculated our ridership at a paltry 0.41%. Cities with silver designation from the league average 2.7% ridership. We struggle to increase ridership because we have not focused our efforts and resources on building safe, protected bicycle networks. The only way to move the needle on ridership is to build biking facilities that allow people to safely go from where they live to where they need to go and do what they need to do. To accomplish this, we have to stop thinking of biking as principally a recreational activity and prioritize it as a sustainable mode of transportation. Instead of continuing to build and pay for unprotected bike lanes to nowhere, such as the ones going in on Tryon Road right now, we need to focus our efforts on providing the missing linkages in our would-be biking networks by resolving the existing trouble spots. We need to follow the advice of Strongtown's president, Chuck Marone, who says, start with where people currently struggle, address that struggle quickly with the next smallest step, then repeat. So here's an example of where people currently struggle. I live near Lake Wheeler Road and I-40, just south of I-40. And just south of I-40 are a lot of neighborhoods where a lot of people live. Just on the other side of I-40 are places where people like to go. The Farmers Market, Centennial Campus, Dix Park, the Walnut Creek Greenway. But biking from the neighborhoods where people live to the places where they want to go requires a roughly 400-foot journey across the completely unprotected Lake Wheeler Road Bridge over I-40. The level of danger and stress in that 400 feet is what prevents most people from biking to where they want to go. Here's the thing. The most dangerous section of any bike network, no matter how short that section is, even 400 feet, is the limiting factor as to whether or not people will choose to bike for transportation. More miles of unprotected bike lanes to nowhere will not elevate Raleigh's status as biking city. But if we identify and fix the places where people currently struggle, we will quickly catch our peer cities and become a top 50.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Queen Hargrove.
Good afternoon. My name is Queen Hargrove, and I live off of 913 Beverly Drive, Raleigh, North Carolina. In the within the last 6 months, I'm going to say that we have had approximately 4 killings there. Young people, young people, not older people. So my request was that I wanted to ask for funds to see what we could do to help some of the youth. Maybe it won't work, I don't know. In some areas, I know that we have worked on projects and we have had a great success on it. In my neighborhood, a lot of people say that maybe we should have the police more present. But the killings were not from the police. It was from the youth, and all of these kids were black kids. They were kids that were killing each other. It was not the police. My interest was, what could we do to help these kids? Maybe it's funding, I don't know. Maybe it's education. Some of them were very educated, very good-looking kids. Maybe it was the living arrangements, I don't know. Worthdale is not a bad place to live. So I'm not even going to say that is that. I don't know. But I thought that if I came here, there would be someone that would know something that I don't know. And I think I know pretty good, quite much. And that's because I've been here long enough that I should and do know. So mine is, if anyone is out there that is able to help, then I would certainly appreciate it. We do have one group, and that is the Ebony Racquet Club, that are doing quite well. We've educated a lot of kids, and they are doing well. So I know for a fact that it can be done. It's there to be done. Somewhere I've just missed it. Thank you very much.
Thank
Madam
you.
Mayor, can we have staff connect with Ms. Hargrove with some of our programs that we do have that may be beneficial, and if there's a gap or something that we're missing, help us figure out, you know, where you may see. Because I do know we run some programs out of our Pathway Center that target those teenagers and young adults. Okay.
We'll follow up with her.
All right, thank you.
This could also be a topic for the joint meeting that we discussed earlier today.
Correct.
Okay. Octavia Rainey.
Good evening.
Good evening, Miss Rainey.
Hi, Octavia Rainey, 1516 East Lane Street. First of all, I want to say, how do you pass out your information to council when you've taken it away to pass out? I have information to pass out. How do I pass it out? Because I want you to hear what I have to say. So what's the process for passing it out tonight? So don't take away my time now. Don't take away my time. Don't do that. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, stop the clock.
Stop the time. Okay, my name is Octavia Rainey. I live at 1516 East Lane Street. Back in 2015, I received a letter from Dick Jones. Dick Jones is community development's attorney who they contract with. I had called community development to ask about the citizen participation plan. I received my notice from Dick Jones. Now I want to ask you, what happened to transparency? Why did Dick Jones send me my notice on citizen participation? Was I not allowed to talk to the Housing and Development Director? Did he give the message to Dick Jones to send me that letter? And I want to know why. You know, you paid Dick Jones to send me a public document that's supposed to be on hand in community development. The citizen participation plan is a public document that go along with the consolidated plan. Those are plans that's supposed to be on hand. So if any citizen come in and asks to see those documents, they aren't sent to you by Dick Jones, but mine was. So I'm asking you, was that a form of intimidation? Was that a form to silence me? Did he think that I would be so intimidated that I wouldn't call him back? Because I did, and I asked him, what's up with this? What's up with this? So you mean to tell me that you wasted money, excuse me, we wasted public money in paying him? Because you know, when you have a consultant that work with any city department, they don't draft it for free. That's not no free service. So he was paid that. He was given that to do by community development. Now, I started this quest in 2015, and I'm not off this quest. You know, there are over 1,400 entitlements. So I have read over 700 citizen participation plans, and I intend to read all of them across the United States. I did not appreciate Dick Jones sending me that, but I wanted to know, why was it so important coming from Housing and Neighborhood Services that Dick Jones personally, and you know what, he highlighted stuff like I was an ignoramus, like I couldn't comprehend, like I couldn't read. Oh yeah? But you know, you talk about transparency, but it's not there with the city.
Thank you, Ms. Rainey. Will Hooker, please.
Greetings. My name is Will Hooker, and I live at 610 Kirby Street in Raleigh. I am a landscape architect and an emeritus professor from NC State, where I taught landscape design for almost 38 years. I wanted to speak to you tonight about at length about the Dix Park Master Plan, but in light of what you did today relative to eliminating the CACs, I'm going to keep my comments extremely brief. While the master plan contains many admirable features, it also contains many errors and imperfections. It needs to be professionally evaluated before we as a city go forward with its implementation. Thank you.
Peter Boyer.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Peter Boyer. I live at 1908 Fairfield Drive. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. I think I have something in common with everyone here, and that I'd like to not die on my commute home tonight. Now, in 2019, 29 Raleigh citizens died on the road. That's more than one every other week of 2019. On October 16th, 2019, 3 pedestrians died on the road in Wake County. A lot of city council meetings discuss widening a road here, fixing a bridge there, maybe adding a sidewalk, maybe not, and so on. With those kinds of discussions, one might think that Raleigh citizens aren't so concerned about the safety of their roads. Well, I bet that all 29 of those people that died on the road in 2019 would be here complaining about the safety of the roads. Unfortunately, those people can't organize, they can't join Oaks and Spokes, they can't go to BPAC, and they certainly can't come to speak at city council meetings like I am tonight. In a June 2019 study, researchers at the University of Colorado, Denver, and the University of New Mexico surveyed 13 American cities over 12 years. They discovered that cities with protected and separated bike lanes had 44% fewer deaths than the average city. They had a 35 to 60% drop in fatalities for all users of the road, not just cyclists, but pedestrians, drivers, and scooterists alike. Raleigh needs connected infrastructure that clearly separates pedestrians and cyclists from cars with physical structures. Send your power to make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Alex Brissett.
Hi, council members. My name is Alex Brissett. I live at 1109 Brookside Drive. I'm a member of Oaks and Spokes, and I'm here to add to the comments made by my colleagues who were kind enough to give their time tonight. One concern that we as Oaks and Spokes have about the future of a safe and connected bike network in Raleigh is resistance from local businesses who are afraid of losing parking. It may seem intuitive that reducing on-street parking reduces business, but if you talk to enough business owners, you might be inclined to share their fears. But the reality is that cycling infrastructure improves business outcomes, and study after study has shown this to be true. The reality is that at worst, there may be a slight negative impact on businesses, but most often the impact is that retail and restaurants and other establishments benefit when people can reach them by bike. Here are some examples of bike lane project studies that tried to account for confounding variables and isolate the impact of bike ridership on businesses. In Toronto, 136 parking spaces were replaced with a protected lane on a main downtown corridor. A 2017 study found that customer visits increased by 16% and spending increased by 9%. A 2014 study in New York City showed that streets with protected bike lanes experienced retail sales spikes of 4 to 24% compared to streets without protected lanes. In 2011, Seattle replaced 12 parking spaces with a protected bike lane along a retail stretch, and afterwards the area saw an over 200% increase in sales index compared with similar streets. The most incredible story comes from Seville, Spain. This is a project that I think deserves a lot of your attention. They undertook their own moonshot and succeeded. They built an entirely new 50-mile protected bike network all across the city in just 4 years, replacing almost 5,000 parking spaces in the process. Ridership increased from levels comparable to Oklahoma City here to the level of Portland, Oregon, which is one of the U.S. gold standards for bike infrastructure. Shopping data was not available as a result of this project, but it continues to enjoy broad support in Seville. So in general, compared with the common expectations, cyclists are more abundant, they shop more frequently, and they often spend more money. I hope you appreciate the benefits of bike lanes enjoyed by all stakeholders, and that you will understand that improved bike infrastructure should not be hindered by fears over loss of parking. We'd be happy to provide these sources for this research and other material to back up our argument if you're interested. Generally, data show that bike lanes are a success, and I want to put to rest the notion that removing parking harms businesses.
Thank you. Next, we have Dan Bowl, Josh Bradley, Jason Hibbets, Mitch Danforth, and Joseph Fiore.
Hi, my name's Dan Bowl. My address is 20 Mayo Street. I'm here in my capacity as a member of Oaks and Spokes. You might have heard from me. I sent out the campaign questionnaire that each one of you got and happily answered. I appreciate it. It was really helpful for our community to learn what your opinions were on bike infrastructure. I'm 6 feet tall. I've been hit by a car twice, or by a person driving a car twice while commuting on my bike. So I have a lot of skin in the game when it comes to creating a connected and safe network for bicycling. But I'm here to urge council to make sure that they're taking into account the needs and expectations of all citizens of Raleigh as they create plans for bike infrastructure, particularly in neighborhoods that are gentrifying. The citizenry that lives there sees new infrastructure as a means of gentrification. And so it can cause a lot of pushback on safety improvements and slow down the process. So I'm here to urge council to look at their community engagement plans and try to make sure that we have an equitable community engagement blueprint as we go forward. For example, Durham has revamped their community engagement policies, and I just urge council to be cautious and aware that many communities see these new bike projects as agents of gentrification, which as a cyclist, I want bike lanes, but I also want people not to be afraid of them and see them as removing them from their homes. Thanks.
Thank you, Dan. Josh Bradley, please.
Hey everybody, Josh Bradley, 1324 Spring Lawn Court, 6'0", 265.2 pounds of relatively disappointed socialist. Just throwing it out there. I was originally going to talk for 3 minutes on one thing, but I'm going to try to talk about 3 things with a minute apiece. So here we go. Eliminating the CACs kind of at the last minute and out of public insight, that sounds like a pretty good win for John Kane. I know he supported most of y'all, so good job. Rather than eliminating it, maybe it would have been a good idea to expand it to involve people that, not only people that own houses, but people that rent theirs too. But if that's the way you want to go, that's the way you want to go. If I had more time, I could have, obviously. The second is I would like to request that y'all consider holding off on the parks bond until we get a hold of a handle on the homeless situation and the affordable housing situation. There needs to be priorities. Both will probably come with a tax increase. Dick's Parks, while I'm sure will be glorious, will gentrify the heck out of the city, even more so than it is, and it will keep on pushing more people out. The moonshot that was talked about is probably going to be the cost of rent in the city of Raleigh. As land value increases due to this, it causes rents to go up and pushes people out. And that's really unfortunate unless you're, wealthy and bourgeois and live in a McMansion. But we need to be concerned about the needs of all the people, and I think it's disappointing that that it's not, the priority isn't housing, but the priority is your beautiful Dick's Park. And the third thing is the relatively toothless community police oversight board. It's said that there's problems getting approval from the legislature about that. I've got an idea, and bear with me here, because you're not going to like what I say to begin with. Eliminate the Raleigh Police Department. Phase it out. I haven't finished.
Please, no comments from the public.
Replace it with a community-based de-escalation task force that have the same kind of authority with less weapons. When it comes down to it, we've had some problems with people getting murdered by people that suffer very little consequences. It's important that people feel safe. There's ways to do that. You emphasize de-escalation, and then you could have access to weapons, but not everybody should need one. They say it's a dangerous job, and I'm not disputing that, but when it comes down to it, people that delivery drivers are 9 times more likely to die than police officers. Garbage collectors are also. And until we start arming delivery drivers and garbage collectors, then I think the super armed force, I think, is probably not necessary. And thank you.
Thank you. Jason Hibbets. Jason, before you begin, I just want to thank you for your leadership on Raleigh Unleashed. It was a great day, and we will be taking up the ideas generated from that at our retreat on Friday. So thank you again for doing that.
All right. Well, part 2 is on the way. Jason Hibbets, 2140 Ramsgate Street. To our friends with the Oaks and Spokes, I was a person who almost hit on my bike on that 400-foot stretch on Lake Wheeler Road. So I was blessed to not be hit. But I'm here to talk to you tonight about Open Raleigh Brigade and NC Open Pass. Tonight I'm here to represent a group of civic geeks who want to improve our community through technology and open innovation. We're a chapter of Code for America. There are over 80 brigades across the United States, 7 in North Carolina. And I want to share with you some things that we're planning for 2020 around our NC Open Pass event series. The vision is to connect our citizens and neighbors to work on issues that are strategic to the city. Our goal is to get 4 to 6 projects through our event pipeline. We'd like to increase our attendance, and we're working to increase our engagement with our government partners. Last week, I had an opportunity to meet with the Wake County CIO and the interim CIO for the city of Raleigh to start the discussion around topics that would align with city and county strategic goals. Some of those topics that came up were affordable housing, transportation, and criminal justice. We do a spring and fall series. Our spring events will kick off on March 7th with Open Data Day, where we introduce people to what open data is, how to use it, and what they can do with it. We will then have a meetup series on the 2nd and 4th Tuesdays of each month, hosted by our friends at HQ Gateway. And then what I really want to focus on tonight is our Triangle Civic Camp event. That is unofficially part 2 of Raleigh Unleashed. We'll use an unconference format where we want to invite people to bring problem statements and to begin working towards solutions that we then will begin to work towards on our fall event series. The ask tonight, I would like to invite all city departments, boards, commissions, council members, citizens, neighbors to start developing problem statements that are that in advance of our Civic Camp event, so that we can begin discussing those ideas at our spring meetup series and really drive to solutions that are equitable for our entire community. You've got some information on what we think makes a good project that I won't belabor tonight, and really just want to provide one example that might help clarify what this could look like. Maybe the City of Raleigh Transportation Department would like to engage citizens and neighbors to help map out sidewalks using open street maps. That's something that we have a lot of expertise in, where we can train someone in about 15 minutes, and then we empower them to map sidewalks for the city. So that's all we have for you tonight. Happy to answer any questions in 20 seconds.
Based on the number of comments we've had tonight, protected bike lanes might be somewhere in there.
All right. See you then. Thank you.
Thank you. Jason, you didn't mention your height.
5'11".
Thank you. Next, we have Mitch Danforth. Hi.
Hi there. My name is Mitch Danforth. I am a lifelong resident of Raleigh. I now own the property at 610 Glasscock Street, and I have a residential design business based right here in Raleigh. And I'm here tonight to talk about the UDO and accessory structures specifically. I know that ADUs are a hot topic. That is a certain use of accessory structures, but accessory structures themselves are also important whether or not they become dwellings. And I'm speaking particularly in R10 districts, these more urban areas where the lots tend to be somewhat narrow and deep. And because of the lots being narrow and deep, accessory structures are incredibly important to these lots because they allow natural light into the houses. By taking garages and workshops away from the principal structure, they allow natural light into the house from the back and front when houses are so often really close to their neighbors on the sides. Not only do they allow light in, they allow nice views out of the houses, and we don't want to be encouraging development on these narrow, deep lots of dark houses that don't have views and don't have light. And so the text changes that came with, let's see, TC2 2018, implemented January 1st of last year, are incredibly prohibitive to accessory structures. They require structures to have between 10 and 20 feet as setbacks, both on the sides and the rear, depending on the height of the structure. Before that, the requirement was 5 feet. And so you can imagine how much of a change that would be on a thin, deep lot in terms of what you can put in your backyard. It makes it incredibly difficult to even get into a garage if you were to have a detached garage, because so often on these lots you have a 10 feet, 12 feet on the side of the house to be able to get a car into the backyard, and then to move over those additional 5 to 15 feet to get into your garage would prevent you from having a garage altogether. And we see this as an issue with our clients. Okay, 1 minute left. So let's, I'd love to see the setbacks rolled back to what they were before, or at least have a conversation about them being more reasonable. Next, the limitations are relative to the size of the structure oftentimes. So your accessory structure can be 75% of the total footprint of the principal structure, and it cannot be higher than the principal structure. Well, that sounds reasonable, but if you have someone who's chosen not to knock down their house, tear it down, and build a McMansion, instead wants to preserve neighborhood character, they're now prohibited oftentimes from even having an accessible garage in the backyard and from having like a garage with maybe an artist studio on top. Accessory structures are great for people growing into their homes and growing with their homes for time. And the last one is that the encroachments are not allowed in the new 6.7.2. And the encroachments are super important for design features like overhangs and even accessibility ramps for handicap.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Can we get staff to look at this, and I'm thinking maybe address this in the manager's report for us to look at, determine the next step?
Sure, we can absolutely respond to that.
Okay, thank you. Joseph Fiore? Okay. Next, if we could have Kimberly Mokhtarian, Chris Maxwell, Timothy Hankins, Ann Stoddard, and Steph Mendel come up to the side. Good evening.
Good evening. Kimberly Mokhtarian, 4224 Crowfield Drive, Raleigh. I'm here today because I first want to say, in commemoration of Black History Month, I am indebted to talk about the struggle that we have gone through up until this very day. I would like to first of all thank the council for coming to a speedy decision on an oversight board that I'm sure will need some tweaking, and I think humanity will allow that. However, we must also address what happens when there is a delay. The delays of a society that takes 400 years to say you're human. A delay that says it's okay for you to live in a neighborhood and not be blockbusted or redlined. I, myself, in 2019 experienced my own delay, and it is a very harsh story. As you well know, Kyron Hinton was one of the most tragic stories we've seen in Raleigh, where law enforcement did not know how to handle his case. They did not know how to handle his situation as an addict, and he later died. But I was called in as an advocate to assist him with this case. And what happened to me is just as traumatic, because on the front lines of justice, many times we fight for others and we don't know we're wounded ourselves. On May the 31st, I believe, Judge Shirley Graham decided that he would release the video footage to Kyron Hinton's case. I received a text message at about 8:30 in the morning from staff member Michael Ballin, who said, "Kim, would you meet me?" I said, "Sure." He said, how fast? Fast as you like. I'm paraphrasing. Long story short, I met him at 10. I was supposed to meet him at 10 o'clock, and he asked for Diana Powell to assist me and come. We waited at 10 o'clock in the morning at McDonald's. We sat there for 4 hours waiting for Michael Ballin, only for someone to call us and say, "Hey, there's a meeting at the chief of police with all the pastors in the city." And we waited because we were not invited to that meeting. Let me say to you, that is one of the most devastating things I've ever experienced in my own city. For me to have to sit and wait for a staff member for 4 hours while they conducted a meeting without the advocates. Now, I understand hang time and lynching, but I don't understand hang time when you are supposed to be there for your city, for your citizens. I am asking for this is a grievance, and I'm asking for an investigation.
Kimberly,
yes.
Your time's up.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here. Could we please have the chief or whoever look at this? And
Yes, we'll look into it and we'll provide you a report.
Okay,
Thank you. And let me just ask you one thing. If not,
Kimberly,
could you
can
source
talk-
that out to the SBI
you can talk
or
to me-
any other?
You can talk to me after, but your
Okay.
time's up right now. Okay,
Thank you.
Chris Maxwell.
Good evening. My name is Chris Maxwell. I'm 6'3", live in the Brentwood Solar House located at 3512 Carolyn Drive here in Raleigh, and I am here to discuss the Brentwood Park Revitalization Project. I served on the planning committee for this project, and the committee made it abundantly clear to Susan Hatchell and the city representatives that we wanted the provisions to accommodate a future EV charging station included in the scope of this project's first phase of development. I personally handed over a North Carolina Clean Energy Technology Center grant application to Susan Hatchell that would fund the equipment and wiring, but would not cover the conduit or concrete pedestal. That would have to be covered out of the bond that was awarded to the project. The grant application was ignored, and the current project manager told the January Atlantic Citizens Advisory Council meeting attendees that the electrician looked into it, but they decided not to move forward. He also stated that the new building required extensive electrical work and the parking lot was being completely demolished and rebuilt. I urge you to require that Phase 1 of the Brentwood Park project include the provisions for a future installation of an EV charging station. This includes determining the parking spaces that will be dedicated to charging, installing a concrete slab to house the future charging equipment, and the conduit that runs to the main power supply for the new shelter and restroom structure that is already planned to be built. Doing this while the parking lot is torn up and repaved will save tens of thousands of dollars. It has been stated time and again in fleet workshops held by the North Carolina Clean Energy Technology Center that adding the conduit and pedestal for an EV charging station during initial construction adds less than $1,000 to the total project cost, where retrofitting can cost $10,000 or more. As a point of reference, I paid over $4,000 to have conduit trenched and a pedestal installed on my property for a charging station. The run required for my project is nothing like the run required for the Brentwood project. And I urge you to require this to be installed while it is cheap. I'd also like to inform you that the North Carolina Clean Energy Technology Center has 2020 grants open for equipment and installation. I have included a dossier that has the application, as well as contact information for our local representative from ChargePoint, the leader in EV charging. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you bring that information forward to the clerk right here? And could staff respond to this?
Sure, and actually what I would suggest is that we provide a full update on the Brentwood Park project. I think there are multiple amenity questions that came from that, and I'll just go ahead and say briefly, the issue is that the current project design is bumping up against the current budget for the project, and so there's some hard conversations going on about that as a part of the design. So we are concerned about it as well. This is another one of those examples where our construction costing is running up against what folks want in the project. So,
if I may add to that, because this is in my district, is that I place high priority on the amenities that are available for the children in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
I know we've allocated quite a bit of budget for demolishing the parking lot, but I really think that demolishing the parking lot should be secondary to providing the swing sets and the water features and so forth for the children in the neighborhood. And so I would like that, make sure that perspective is carried forward into this project.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Cox. We agree with those concerns as well. Some of the issues with the parking lot are also having to do with the stormwater runoff regulations, and there's some cost associated with that. But I would like to include the scope overall, including the EV and the amenities in the report, if that's okay.
That's fine. Thank you. Timothy Hankins.
Madam Mayor, ladies and gentlemen, how you doing? My name is Timothy Hankins. I used to live at 1009 Fieldgrass Place. The house was stolen. And then I own 610 Martin Street, right up the street from here. And that was stolen December the 15th of 2017. So I would like to give Miss Smith right here, this very nice lady right here, I like to give her And that way she can pass them around. It's just the information on the last step of my property. And in that information, it includes a police report for the last one, and it hasn't gone anywhere. $812,500. $812,500 is what they got for both of my houses. Title fraud, mortgage fraud, you name it, they do it. The people who's done this live in Raleigh. The initial actions was generated in Raleigh. These are only 2 of the 10 properties that I have lost, and 8 of them was in Wake County. 2 of them was in Raleigh. The unlawful activity of stealing property from African American people is getting mixed up with the Raleigh Revitalization Project. I've been licensed 25 years. I started building houses for the city in 2005. I love the program. I'm an advocate for you guys. When people run around here and say they're running us out of town, I say, no, they're not. And I have not explained to one person yet that did not understand how the program worked. But in my case, they just stealing my house. So you got me running around here with the fraud, and y'all got the paperwork, they can't argue it. And then you got the renters who were living in these projects and have to move. Well, the owners are selling the house, and that's what I have to explain to them. Most of the houses that I built 5 up there on Cabarrus Street in 2019. And majority of them, black people moved back in. This is what I had to tell the people. So I'm like, you're wrong about that. I have contacted the Raleigh Police Department. Is it 3 minutes up? Really? Okay. Well, y'all have the information. All right, thank you.
Okay. Next, we have Ann Stoddard.
Good evening. I'm Ann Stoddard. I'm at 3700 Glenwood Avenue, and I'm here as the co-chair of the Development Services Advisory Committee, which was established by the city to provide technical input on development issues. We are excited to support the council in its initiative begun this afternoon to identify easy fixes to the UDO to advance housing affordability. To support that effort, DSAC has developed a list of what we hope will be the next 15 straightforward changes to the UDO in support of housing affordability. Many of these relate to townhome developments, which are part of the missing middle, which you are targeting. And I've shared the list with Ken Bowers, and I also have a copy here to leave with the clerk. So DSAC applauds your good start this afternoon, and we look forward to collaborating with council and staff on the next changes which we can make to the UDO to advance housing affordability. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Steph Mendel. Good evening.
Hi. Steph Mendel, 3225 Oak Grove Circle. 6 of you made a decision earlier today to immediately disband Raleigh's Citizens Advisory Councils. That decision was lacking in transparency and in due process. You kept your plans secret from a fellow council member, but shared it with some media outlets. That sounds like a dysfunctional council to me. You didn't bother to engage with the RCAC. From what I understand, at least one of you met with the RCAC leadership last week to talk about improving the CAC process. But you never brought up the fact that you were planning to dismantle them. Why is secrecy necessary if you truly have plans for new and improved community engagement? Or is this like Trump and the Republicans and the Affordable Care Act? Let's throw it out for something better, but we can't tell you yet what that is. One guess is that you're ashamed of your plan and you feared it wouldn't pass muster if people had been allowed to review and comment on it or mobilize against it. That's what happened last time the council tried to eliminate CACs, because the public actually supports them. So you start out your improved community engagement by stifling public input by not giving notice. What's the urgency? Why not wait for the consultant report? Please revisit your decision and leave the CACs in place while you work with a consultant. Does it take a lot of time for a council member to attend CAC meetings? Yes, but that's part of your job. It's about engaging with your constituents. Do you sometimes have to take some heat from people who are upset or who disagree with you about something? That's part of the job too. You give a lot of lip service to transparency and to freedom of speech, but you are stifling Raleigh residents. You say it's because you don't want to be influenced by a vocal minority. I think it's pretty clear from this decision and from many of the other decisions you've already made and will undoubtedly make in the future that you are being influenced by a few vocal minorities, the Home Builders Association, the Triangle Apartment Association, and other special interest groups. I know nothing I say here tonight will change your minds because you've been bought and paid for, but I'm hoping the media, the objective media, and the public will see you for what you are. Now I'd like to ask all CAC supporters who are here tonight to stand up, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mendel, for your comments. There's a saying, don't throw a stone in a glass house, and it reminds me of a motion that the previous council took where 3 and 4 members voted to rescind the rights of the mayor's approved and proposed committee appointments. You don't have the right to speak. Thank you.
Know what you're talking
Exactly.
Excuse me.
Thank you. And further, what I would like to say is that while this vote was difficult and we worked extremely hard to get this right, and thank you all for coming, and I will talk to you if you want to stay after. It will be long. What you can't ask is who isn't here because they didn't know that this meeting was happening, or who isn't here because they work 3 jobs and can't make it. That is who we represent. We represent a majority. And when you signed up, you said that you were signing up because you wanted to talk about democracy. Democracy is about representing the majority. And in 2018, when we did a survey of the citizens and residents of Raleigh, over 90% of people said that they didn't even know what CACs were and hadn't attended a CAC meeting. So when we're talking about majorities, we have a difficult job when we have to make these decisions, but we made the right one. So I hear what you're saying, and thank you for coming. But I know that I'm proud of what we did.
Excuse me, folks. I would ask for decorum, please. The next speakers, the final 4, are David Walton, Michael Lindsay, Mary Dolberg, and Nancy Sullivan. That's it. Is David here? David Walton? Are you Mr. Walton?
Yes, I am.
Thank you.
Thank you. Evening, Council. My name is David Walton. Stay at 4617 Mailer Drive, Wake Forest. I'm here representing my daughters. They purchased some property about 9 months ago. And when they purchased the property, they were told that the septic was on the property. And we all had it tested and everything. The city did. Came out and said that it was deemed. It was no good. Well, we back and forth with the city of Raleigh. We ended up talking with several different people, and they were telling us that we could not use the septic, and there was no way. Well, my daughters, they look forward to building the house. They're young. I'm proud of them. And we're at a point now we can't do anything because the city is saying you can't build if you don't have some way of disposing of the septic. Well, I'm asking y'all that if y'all would allow my daughters to tie in for sewer with the city so that we could go head on and get the process going, because they are on a timeline and they are on a strict budget. They don't have the funds to go out here and spend an additional $15,000 per house to put that in. But if y'all could, please, I ask that you would work with us on the sewer, just hooking up the sewer part, and we could get started, because we are on a time frame. And the just go ahead and tell you, the bank is asking, hey, when are we going to see some type of, progress on the property? So I don't want that all just to go down the drain, So I ask that-
Literally?
Yeah. So
Okay.
would you please reconsider?
Can we get,
We'll provide you a
Some-
report. I'm not immediately familiar with the case, so we'll ask our Public Utilities Group to look at that and provide you a report.
okay, thank you, sir. I wanted to go back to Ann Stoddard's comments regarding DSAC recommendations, and if we could get a report on that as well. I'd be particularly interested knowing what we move forward this afternoon in terms of text changes, what additional items are there, and then what complements what we've already done.
Right, we will provide that information into a report for you, and then if the council would like to receive that and then take action on any items, then we would await that direction.
Okay, thank you. Michael Lindsay?
Michael Lindsay, 1406 Park Drive, Raleigh, 6 feet tall. Thank you, City Council, for this opportunity to speak. I would like to address the status of Raleigh's CACs and your vote today to abolish them. This decision was obviously made before the vote and with no citizen input. Quite ironic, given that CAC stands for Citizen Advisory Council. Apparently, you did not want advice from Raleigh citizens before casting your votes. How is it that we the people and at least one council member were kept out of the loop while the Indy newspaper seems to be in the loop? Should we assume going forward that as Fox News is to the Republican Party, so the Indy is to the current City Council? What open meetings laws may have been violated in this process?
None.
Last Friday, I witnessed the Republican-controlled Senate vote to call for no witnesses in the impeachment trial of Donald Trump, the first time in American history. Tomorrow, they will likely acquit him of his crimes, going against the centuries of our country's legal system. This afternoon, total surprise to me, I hear about a vote with no citizen input that was developed in secret, throwing out a process Raleigh citizens have used for almost half a century. This evening, I am sad for Raleigh, and I'm sad for our country. And on a personal note, those are my, how much? Okay, I got a few times. I've been involved in city politics going back to the 80s. One of my first paid gigs was helping Charles Meeker, one of our greatest mayors in Raleigh, get elected to city council the first time. And I have never seen this kind of deception in the time I've been here. Maybe it's happened before and I wasn't paying attention, but I'm paying attention now. There's nothing we can do about what y'all have done today, apparently. I don't know. If you can go back, please do. If you can't, I'm going to stay engaged to see where we go forward. But this process that got here today is shameful. Thank you.
Just 1 minute. Michael, there will be opportunities for plenty of citizen participation, so I look forward to you joining in that. Thank you.
Hi, Mary Dolberg, 3413 Cherry Lane, and I'm short. But I would like to be as eloquent as Michael just was, and I want to say that I was shocked. I'm volunteering for somebody, a candidate, and I found out that something was going on. I went to the video services. Great introductory for your motions. I was so proud of my representative till I found out that he was introducing something that was completely opposite of what he was saying, talking about democracy, talking about improved communications, talking about this city as if they want our input and you're canning it. I don't get that. That is not democracy. Democracy dies in the darkness. You can't have discussions, secret discussions, and make decisions based on things that 90% of citizens input. We're missing some statistics there. How many citizens participated in that? How many citizens go to these CACs? Where are those statistics? You know, a lot of people stood up here tonight and they had data. I think data is a great thing. I can't do math to save my life, but data is a really good thing. And I didn't hear it. And your response of 90% doesn't cut it as far as data goes. I heard that 3,000 respondents was a great number for a survey that was done recently by the. So how many respondents to this with the CACs? 3,000? 90% of 3,000? How many people go to these CACs? You don't have that data.
Actually, we do.
I'm disappointed.
Actually, the data from the last citizen survey was 99.5% of people had never heard of CACs or attended a CAC meeting. That's the actual data. So thank you.
Y'all have a great video out there on the CACs that you produced last year. And taking away community engagement, that is wrong. Trust. Where's the trust?
Please, your time is
Your
up.
bond is going to be in trouble here. Trust.
Please sit down.
The citizens of Raleigh want trust.
Please sit
You're
down.
not building it.
I don't want to have you removed. Thank you. Okay, Nancy Sullivan is our final speaker. Is Nancy here? Okay, we are done with the public comment period, and we're going to take a brief recess. No, seriously, folks, just stand up for a moment and breathe, okay? We've all been sitting here for almost 2 hours. Just stand up. Trust me, breathe, you'll feel better. Stretch. Now, don't y'all feel better standing up a little bit, breathing? In fact, you feel so good, I can't get you to be quiet. Okay, this is now the public hearing portion of the meeting. We're going to try and expedite some things. Bear with us. First, we have the first matter scheduled for public hearing is utility extension agreement 840 Creedmoor Road and 5901 Jeffreys Grove School Road. I'm going to open the hearing, and when I do, I'm going to ask if there's anybody here to speak against this. Is there anybody here to speak in favor? Okay, we're going to close the hearing, and I'm going to move for approval. Can I have a second? Second. All in favor? Opposed? Okay. Next, we have traffic calming projects. Again, we have somebody from staff up here. Let me see. To present. But before you start, let me just ask this question. I don't open the hearing yet, right? Or can I open it?
You can open it. You're not required to hear the staff report unless.
No, please stay for a moment.
Unless do your thing. About
Okay.
It if anybody's
I'm
here.
going to open the hearing. The first project is Park Drive from Oberlin Road to St. Mary Street. Is there anybody here to speak against this project? This is traffic calming. Anyone here to speak against Park Drive from Oberlin Road to St. Mary Street? If anybody is here to speak, who wants to speak in favor, could you just raise your hand? I'm ready to close the hearing and move approval if you are okay with that. Okay. We're going to close the hearing on this matter. Do I have a motion? It's your district. All in favor? Aye. Approved. Second, Woodburn Road from Smallwood Drive to Wade Avenue. I'm going to open the hearing. Is there anyone here to speak against this project? Okay. Is there anyone here in favor of the project? Please raise your hand. Yes, I see the hands, and I've gotten quite a few emails about this. So I am going to close. Are you okay with us closing the hearing and moving approval? Okay. Closing the hearing. Your district?
Move for approval.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. The third item, Van Dyke Avenue from Garner Street to Oberlin Road. I'm going to open the hearing. Do I have anybody here who would like to speak against this project? Okay. Do I have anybody here who is in favor of the project? Yes. Oh, this is going to be easy. Can we just close the hearing and move approval? Yes. Okay. Hi, Diana. We are going to close the hearing. Do I hear a motion to approve your districts?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Thank you
there
all
we
for
go.
coming. The email worked.
One more. Dartmouth Road from Campus Drive to Windsor Place. I'm going to open the hearing. Is anyone here to speak against this? Anybody here in favor? Do you mind if we just close the hearing and you're good? Move approval? Okay. You're smiling. We'll do it. Closing the hearing. Do I have a motion?
I move approval.
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? No one. Thank you so much, everybody, for sitting through a very lengthy public process. That was democracy in action earlier, and we really appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, if I can I ask staff if they could share with us the rest of the complete list, or if it's online so we can kind of see where things, I know the list changes as new projects are scored, but if we can just form a way where maybe quarterly we give an update, could that be
But let's go ahead and answer that here. Go ahead.
We have an update that will be coming to council here shortly with a new list and some proposed changes, so that will be coming shortly.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think there's some happy people here. Thank you. All right. The next one is petition annexations. Let's see. This one is for Capital Partners of Raleigh 2 LLC, residential 19 single-family homes. I'm going to open the hearing. Is there anyone here to speak against this? Anyone here to speak in favor? Can we close the hearing and move approval? Okay, closing the hearing. Who would like to make a motion? Come on, folks.
Motion to approve.
Okay, second?
Mayor, I think we have a consistency statement on this.
Not on.
I'm sorry.
Not on an annexation.
I was going to say.
Well, I was going to let you read it.
Very good.
The attorney comes out. So we have a motion and a second. The second was Nicole. Sorry, Counselor Stewart. It's getting late. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Patrick, do you have anything else? Okay.
No, Mayor. Thank you very much.
All right.
I vote aye.
Thank you. That's 8-0. The next is a text change zoning condition for TCZ 419 Old Town Development. We have had quite a bit of information on this. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to open the hearing. Is there anyone here to speak against this development? Or text change, I should say. Anybody in favor? Okay. I'm going to close the hearing. Corey, this is your district.
Yeah, I definitely want to thank the applicant for keeping some senior housing in this project. This text change keeps senior housing in the project, and I know the CAC voted for this as well. So I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated February 4th, 2020, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the text change to the conditional use zoning.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Next is rezoning Z1516 Raven Ridge Road. Just to get an idea of who is here to speak on this, because I know there's a lot of interest in this case. Who is here to speak in favor? Could you raise your hand? Okay. Who is here to speak against? Okay. Bynum, why don't you do your thing?
Thank you. Bynum Walter, Raleigh City Planning and Development. This is rezoning 1516. It's a request to rezone just under 20 acres from R4. The Urban Watershed Protection Overlay District would remain in place, but the base district would change to plan development. The Planning Commission makes no recommendation here. They voted on two separate motions, one each for approval and denial, neither conclusively, and the North CAC in a split vote recommends denial. You can see that the zoning in the current area is largely residential, so you have R4 to the east and south, and then residential 1, which allows 1 unit per acre, and then R10 with conditions in the townhouse development to the south here, and then the area to the west across Falls of Neuse is in the county's jurisdiction and has a requirement of about 80,000 square feet per unit.
I think that R1 is the city's water plant.
Yes.
Okay.
It's still zoned R1, allows an institutional use. So the original conditional use rezoning request was filed back in July of 2016. The council sent it back to the Planning Commission in December of 2016 for further revision. At that time, it was amended to a plan development request. But that version of the request never came forward for Planning Commission review after an ownership change in May of 2018. This current iteration moved forward in the review process and is in front of you tonight. So a plan development reminder, this is a special zoning district that allows modifications that could be less restrictive than the UDO. The modifications have to be explained based on general design principles. They have to include an illustrative master plan, and we complete a coordinated review with the development services between planning and development services staff to ensure enforceability. We talked about the zoning already. And there's that water treatment plant you were talking about in the aerial view. You love that, don't you? That's great. So that's across the street from Raven Point, the townhouse development. The Annie Louise Wilkerson Nature Preserve is in the Wake County jurisdiction, but a City of Oaks Foundation property, and then low density residential to the east. A couple of views of the site from the intersection at Falls of Neuse and along Raven Ridge. So just some highlights of our master plan. The base district here is residential mixed use. Maximum of 180 units are allowed, can include townhouses and apartments. No non-residential principal uses or structures, and no horizontal building dimension greater than 400 feet, and then no townhouse building of more than 8 units. So they're doing what they can to control bulk. And then the height has been restricted to 60 feet along Falls of Neuse Road and 45 feet closer to the existing neighborhood. You can see those areas here. So this is the circulation plan, is also the dividing plan in terms of the expectation about height. So that 45-foot height limit is on the eastern part of the site and the 60-foot closer to the street. This drawing also shows a conceptual vehicular circulation plan and access points. So you're seeing access from on the north here at Falls of Neuse, at Raven Ridge, a new street that would stub here, and a stub to Dehi Justin, which is an improved street at this time. So the parkway frontage standards apply here with the exception for pedestrian access requirements. The Urban Watershed Protection Overlay District would remain in place, which requires tree conservation or reestablishment, and they've allowed both in the master plan, and then also requires enhanced stormwater controls. And they have limited the area of the building story above the 4th story in the 60-foot zone. It can only be 50% of the area of the story below. So they're saying that that upper story would not have the same square footage as the story below. Again, another conceptual plan, this one for open space and the streetscape buffer and transitional protective buffer yards. So those are shown in 2 shades of green. The darker green, which is generally closer to the edge of the property, is the streetscape buffer and transitional protective buffer yard. And then the tree conservation, this is the tree conservation search area. And from this area, they would expect to, in this area, would expect the required tree conservation area to be located. They have included some architectural, landscaping, and amenities area standards, and then have made some, imposed some regulations on themselves about land disturbance in the neighborhood transition area, either to restore existing grades or to provide positive drainage away from the shared property line. So they're basically saying they wouldn't grade the water to flow towards their neighbors. They're required by code to provide some illustrative 3D renderings, and these are they. So a couple of views from Falls of Neuse and Raven Ridge. The big change in entitlement here is the increase in residential units. And then there are some changes in the setbacks. So the current setbacks, you can see in the first column there, and the proposed zoning is increasing the potential setback for townhouse and apartment. And then the internal streets, the setbacks are decreasing a little bit. They were required to complete a traffic impact analysis. That's required of all planned developments, and that just measures the impact of the proposed development on AM and PM traffic volumes, and would not otherwise be required for this request if it weren't a PD because of the estimated trip generation. 2 intersections were identified where the level of service would be below comprehensive plan standards. That condition would result regardless of whether or not this site was developed. And then the proposed traffic improvements that came out of that study are the implementation of a left turn lane within the Raven Ridge Road right-of-way at the southern access point down here. They have exempted themselves from build use standards. They have exempted themselves from the ground floor elevation minimum, from transparency requirements, their outdoor amenity requirements, and block perimeter. And so just what that looks like, what they would be required by the current zoning versus the no requirement under what they're asking for. In the parkway frontage, they're not requiring the pedestrian access standard, but instead a 6-foot wide sidewalk to connect to Falls of Neuse from the development to Falls of Neuse and to Raven Ridge. And then they have limited some of the requirements in the neighborhood transition yard. And street trees are also allowed to be planted closer together than the code typically would allow. And that's what that looks like in a table format. So this request is consistent with the office and residential mixed-use future land use map designation here, as well as the parkway frontage mapped on the urban form map. And it has been determined to be consistent with the plan overall. I'll look at those policies. I want to talk actually about the two inconsistent policies. So the infill compatibility policy specifically is triggered by the additional height that they're asking for that's considered incompatible with the adjacent development. And then the area plan policies, there are 4 area plan policies that were deemed consistent with this request. And this final one about this particular site, the policy guidance here suggests that apartment building would not be appropriate. They have allowed that. And the policy guidance also suggests that height should be limited. It's pretty specific, recommends an average of 37 feet and a maximum of 40 feet. And of course, the 60-foot and 40-foot height limit that they've put in place for themselves as their self-imposed regulation allows a height greater than what the area plan policy guidance would require. There's additional information in your backup if you're interested about the area plan specifically. So Planning Commission again makes no recommendation, and the North CAC did not recommend approval. What kind of questions can I answer for you before you open the public hearing?
Any questions? Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing. And first, we'll start with the applicant, 8 minutes for each side. We will start, Mr. Birch. Remember, 8 minutes, and you might want to save time for rebuttal.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. Michael Birch with Longleaf Law Partners here on behalf of the owner. Also with me tonight are William Barker and Will Barker, part of the ownership group, and Jacob Anderson as well. Appreciate Bynum covering a lot of the details of the plan. We just want to be very kind of upfront with council on what this request is about. It is the purpose of this is to allow for new types of housing in this area of the city, townhomes and residential condos, a maximum of 180 units, which actually works out to less than 10 units per acre. I'll kind of get into some of the details of the request, but I just want to highlight, as Bynum did early on, that this property has been subject to a rezoning for 4 years. And when the Barkers purchased the property, they back in May of 2018, they engaged with the surrounding owners, the church, townhome community to the south, neighbors to the east. We're very upfront about their residential project, 180 units, and the height that they were looking for. And through that process, we've amended the master plan in many ways, and so what you have before you is a product of that conversation. I would say the biggest part of this case has been a tension between the many constraints on the site and the need to provide some additional density and new types of housing in this area of the city. The master plan preserves the character of Falls of Neuse Road and Raven Ridge Road by providing the parkway buffer. We are transitioning and actually providing a greater transition than would otherwise be required by the UDO to our neighbors to the east. And we're locating the development and the height within the center of the site. And also just say the topography of the site is such that that building height, where it is located in the middle of the site, is actually sitting about a story below Raven Ridge Road. And so the perception and Falls of Noose Road. And so the perception as you're driving along Falls of Noose Road is that those buildings will really appear as 3 stories. In order to, again, accommodate all of those constraints, that has led to how we've accommodated height and provided for height in the middle of the site, and would happy to address some comment, any concerns about that. That's been one of the topics of conversation throughout the process. Want to touch a moment on the traffic, as Bina was explaining. She noted that there are 2 legs of an intersection that are F, and I just want to note that that's an F without this development anyway, but we are only adding about 1 second of delay to those 2 intersections. So we're able to accommodate this new housing, additional housing, with really minimal impact on traffic. And so just to close, I want to just emphasize that we are consistent with the future land use map. We are consistent with the key comprehensive plan policies, particularly those about providing additional housing opportunities, a variety of housing, protecting the character of the area, environmental protection. We're consistent with the key area plan policies, consistent with the urban form map. And so with that, I will kind of reserve the rest of the time. I do believe there is a representative of the church here that would like to speak as well, but
You'll
thank
reserve
you.
the time. Okay, if you could hold that. Okay. Sir, if you'd like to come up.
Good evening. My name is Attorney Stefan Bowens, and I represent Mount Pleasant Baptist Church, located at 10720 Falls of the Noose Road, which is the property that is immediately adjacent to this proposed development. And on behalf of the church, I'm here tonight to express their support for this particular project, given the idea that, in fact, we know that this property at some point is going to be developed. We as the church, in this case, believe that this may be the most appropriate and best use for the property. And therefore, the church has asked me to come here tonight to articulate their position with respect to this project.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, could we set
Madam Mayor, just for the clerk, he was for the project, so
Yes.
it was 4:21. He probably spoke 45 seconds. So we just need to subtract that if what's left.
So, sir, you'd like to speak as well in favor? Okay, so if we could put that, okay, we'll leave the clock there.
Bob Fry, 1409 Coolmore Drive, Raleigh, 27614. I am the president of River Oaks Homeowners Association and also the co-chairman of Falls North area plan, a small area plan. I came here tonight not realizing that the CAC was abolished, but I want to share something with you about this developer versus the history of this land, which many of you maybe know or not know. This developer reached out to the community, as the attorney shared with you, and engaged homeowners, businesses, and we had opportunity to collaborate, to talk back and forth, to be able to work together, to be able to spend many hours actually working together. As a developer for over 20 years myself and coming from Los Angeles and developing for 15 years, I can tell you that community involvement and community input is critical and vital. This developer is a good example of engaging with the community. This site and other sites along Falls of Noose, which was part of the small area plan, we worked many hours, and there were many people that would come to workshops and give their input. And by hearing that the CAC was abolished tonight, I came here not knowing that. I am very disappointed. You've taken away the voice of the community, of homeowners, of businesses. And again, Mr. Barker and this development team should be complimented for the fact that they listened. They asked questions. They brought exhibits. They asked for input. And they made changes. This is what democracy is all about. This is what community involvement is all about. At one CAC meeting, we had over 400 people attend. Now, I don't attend other CAC meetings, but I can tell you in North Raleigh, you have a community that's very engaged and very involved. So I would just admonish you, again, I didn't come here realizing this, but I would admonish you to rethink this. Please, do not take away the voice of the community. Let people work with developers. For the 20 years that I developed in this city, that was what I expected as a developer. I look forward, actually, to working with the homeowners who came to me sometimes making requests that seemed unreasonable. But at the same time, by listening, I understood another side of the story and their concerns.
So, excuse me, there's only 1 minute left. I don't know if Mr. Birch wants to hold that minute. Are you okay with that?
You want me to finish? You want me to stop?
No, I'm just asking, he said he wanted to reserve some time. Do you want to hold that minute?
Yes, I didn't necessarily want to cut him off, but...
We'll hold 1 minute. We'll put 8 minutes up. If we could hear from, raise your hand if you would like to speak against. One, can you come up and give your name and address for the record, please? And we'll set that at 8 minutes.
Marshall Clausen. I live at 10421 Blue Dunway, and I do live in Raven Point, across the street. When the development was developed, the building height was limited to 2 stories and shall not exceed 30 feet height. When we heard this case, the CAC said it was going to be 4 stories. Then at the Planning Commission, they removed the number of stories. Now, I'm sure that was one of the reasons that it was a 3-3 vote. Now we hear that it's, let me get this right. Now we hear that it's stories above the 4th in the 60-foot zone may only have 50% of the floor story above the story below. Well, why can't they just come out and say, it's going to be 5, it's going to be 6? Well, we don't know because it says story. That's not one, it's multiple. That's plural. My other comment would be that the stormwater, the city will not, he said it, they talked about it at the Planning Commission. The city will not allow third-party access for the stormwater device. They also had mentioned he could have a deeded access down to High Justin. Well, that's not there yet, so they don't have that. So they mentioned that they could put it on their own property. Well, if they add the 25 feet access road on the eastern property line, his whole plan has to get shifted to the west. And we haven't seen that plan. Will the access road that they have still have a 50-foot buffer? Will they still meet 40% forestation? We don't know because we haven't seen that plan. With this new concept, are they stacked now 3 high, 4 high? Because they just lost a lot of usable land by moving everything to the west. Again, we don't know. I would recommend that you enforce policy for area plan Falls North 11.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak against this project? Okay, Mr. Birch, would you like your 1 minute?
Okay, one thing. We did meet with the applicant late last year, and they mentioned, we asked at the meeting, and he said it was going to be for sale units, no rentals.
Mr. Birch, you have 1 minute. Could you just tell us the price point of these units?
Yeah. As I'm addressing these others, Jacob's going to come up here and give me that answer. So within a minute, we'll have that.
Okay.
So with regard to stormwater, Again, we have deeded access to where we anticipate having our device, and our plan reflects that, and we have to comply with the stormwater requirements to have access, and that's we will do that. Question with regard to the story calculation. Again, at one time we had stories in there. As you all probably have heard throughout your time here, is a ever-changing thing about how height is calculated, what counts as a story, what doesn't, what counts as a basement, what does not. That's true. How do you calculate height? And so what we went with instead of stories is height in feet, and then we, again, always anticipated a rooftop amenity, so that's why we had that 50% limitation. And with that, last couple of seconds for Jacob on the price point.
We're anticipating the 4-story units to have a more affordable unit towards the bottom level. It's about a 1,400 to 1,500 square foot unit. The upper levels would be 2,400 square feet with rooftop terraces, probably a little bit more of your smaller families or maybe your person moving out of Bedford. Then the townhomes along the back would be around 2,400 to 2,500 square feet. So about a third of the units would be around 1,400 to 1,500 square feet, and we anticipate those to hit a mark in that market that is not there of 250 to 275. So.
Okay, thank you. All right, so nobody else here to speak? Okay, we are going to bring this back. Are you having trouble with that tonight? We're going to bring this back to the table. We'll close the hearing. Councilor Cox, this is your district. Do you have anything?
Again, the main point of contention with this has been the height. But like with a lot of rezonings, there are pluses and minuses. And my sense of the community is that at the CAC, the vote was against, largely because of the height. But on the other hand, there are many good things about this development, including the number of units and the vegetation and the setbacks and so forth. So if we close is the hearing closed?
Yes.
It is. So what I would like to do is make the following motion. I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated February 4th, 2020, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning amendment.
Second.
Okay.
Oh, no, I'm
See-
reading a different one. I'm good.
Okay. All right. Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Thank you very much. This has been a long time in the making. Okay, next is Z619.
This is a request to rezone 1.88 acres from DX with a 5-story height limit and shopfront frontage to the same base district with a 40-story height limit, shopfront frontage and conditions. This request is inconsistent with the future land use map and with the 2030 comprehensive plan. The Central CAC voted in favor if affordable housing conditions were affordable housing was provided. That condition has been offered. I just will note this has been heard at public hearing previously and sent by the council back to Planning Commission to allow discussion of affordable housing and additional height, both of which are showing up in this request at this point. So we went from a 20-story request to a 40-story height request, and they've added conditions about affordable housing. And then the Planning Commission recommends approval unanimously. Their previous review, they had a vote against because of the affordable housing question. So we're here. The site's over here. That didn't show up very well. So this is on in the warehouse district. It's the majority of the block bounded by Martin, Harrington, Davie, and West. And you can see that there's lots of DX zoning in this area. It's a mix of heights. So you have 20 stories to the north at the Dillon. You have some 12, some 5, some 4, and some 3. the mouse is given up for the night. So an aerial view of that site, you can see we're just south of the Dillon and north of the railroad tracks. There is a little gap in there, parcel that's not included in the request on the block. Some views, view from West Street, so you're kind of at Raleigh Union Station looking away from the station back towards downtown. A view of the site, the cam portion of the site, and then another view looking back from Davie Street along west. And then just a reminder that there is a significant grade change at that west, on the south side of the west facade, setting up the possible connection for West Street later. So they've prohibited some uses. They have made some requirements about the width of the pedestrian connection between Martin and Davie because of that height grade change. They're saying they were going to make that connection at the higher elevation and around the corner. They have specified some building materials, have required preservation of building facade on Martin Street, and height and step backs per this exhibit. So you can see they're putting 40 stories in the middle of the block, with then 7-story step down to 3 stories on the on the Harrington side, step down to 3 stories on the Davie Street side, and then 7 to 3 stories on the Martin Street side, and just a 7-foot setback from West Street. Some transparency requirements along that pedestrian connection so that the building, you can see what's happening in the building, creating a more active condition on the street there. And then also requiring documentation of buildings designated as contributing structures of the National Register district here. So this is in the Depot district. They are requiring a particular kind of outdoor amenity area for themselves, and some standards for structured parking screening to help manage light. And then they have put some conditions on themselves about how they would provide affordable housing in the site. So significant increase in entitlement, office intensity, and total building square footage going up significantly, and the residential units going up. Retail is held steady. So future land use map here is community mixed use, which is a step down from that central business district and does not envision the kind of height that this request is bringing with it. And then the urban form map, this is in the downtown area and the transit stop buffer. Downtown West Gateway, again, we're in the Depot district as a medium density mixed use district with a 2 to 4 story height recommendations, 15 to 30 units an acre. They are surpassing that. So a lot of consistent policies, consistent with the urban form map, but also inconsistent with the plan overall, including the future land use map, and a handful of inconsistent policies there. And if approved, this would amend your future land use map from central business district to central business district from community mixed use. That really addresses that height question that I alluded to earlier. Central CAC and Planning Commission are both in favor. Can I answer questions for you about this one?
Are there any questions? Okay, I'm going to do what I did last time. I'm going to open the hearing, and I'm going to ask if there's anybody here to speak against this rezoning. Anyone against? Okay, by a show of hands, who's in favor of this rezoning? Okay. I'm going to close the hearing and ask for somebody to make a motion to approve.
I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated February 4th, 2020, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning amendment. This approval is also deemed an amendment to the 2030 Comprehensive Plan and the future land use map to the extent described in the adopted consistency statement.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Carries 8-0. Thank you. No. Next, we have rezoning Z2319.
This is a request to
Bynum, before we start, can I just have a show of hands? I'd like to get an idea of who is here. I know there's a lot of interest in this case. Who is here because of this issue? Just raise your hand. Okay.
You ready?
Ready.
Okay. So this is a request to rezone 6.57 acres with a Strickland Road address, rezone from R2 to R10 with conditions. The Northwest CAC voted against this case by a significant number, and the Planning Commission recommends approval. So you can see the parcel here is between Strickland Road, which is up here, and Woody Hill. There's a private access easement from Woody Hill that really only is really like a driveway type access, and then the property to the north of this is planned in review for residential development, and they would take access from a new street being constructed as part of that project, likely for this project, if this were to be developed. We already talked about that. So you can see the character of development here. You have a mix of moderate and low density residential and some commercial to the west, largely low density surrounding the site proper, and Strickland Road Neighborhood Park is on the north side of Strickland here. And then Hairsnipe Creek runs through the property, which is also bisected by power easement. So here's a look at that approved subdivision to the north. So our zoning site in question is down here, and here's Strickland, and they would be bringing a new public street down through the site to the north. And here's a view from Woody Hill and another from Strickland, looking at the site, which is wooded now. So they have provided conditions here. Apartments are prohibited. Remember, the base district here is R10, but the residential density is limited to no more than 6 units per acre versus the 4 units that's allowed in the surrounding area. They have required a setback to be a minimum of 30 feet from the primary street, side street, and rear lot line, and have provided a reforested transition yard adjacent to 2 properties along Woody Hill. And let's go back and I can show you those. That is these two, 1, 2. They're also requiring a 6-foot fence along the perimeter of the property to the east, south, and west, and full cutoff light fixtures, really encouraging that down lighting versus a broadcast light. So the increase here, the residential density is limited to 6 units per acre, maximum potential units of 39, and you can see the setbacks, the front and side and some of side are going down. So the R10 with conditions is consistent with the low density residential designation on the future land use map. It is consistent with the plan overall. There's no urban form guidance. A number of consistent policies, the density transition, conserving, enhancing, and revitalizing neighborhoods, and infill compatibility are all inconsistent still. And the reminder, just the CAC voted against and the Planning Commission voted in favor. What kind of questions can I answer?
Are there any questions for Bynum?
I have one question. Is this property in our city limits?
Is this property in our city limits?
Because I was trying to pull up our maps and
Let me
it's
look.
taking too long.
I don't think that it is, because the neighborhood adjacent is not.
So there's no
So development would require annexation.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to open the hearing, and there will be 8 minutes per side. So if you are here to speak in favor, there are 8 minutes. If you're here to speak against, it's 8 minutes. Please keep that in mind, because if one person gets up there and hogs the whole time, then other people won't be heard. So the applicant take it if you would like to come up and start.
I have a statement, Janet McLean, 119 Lincoln Court, statement about this case, Z2319. I seek rezoning approval from R2 to R10 for 2 parcels of land I own totaling 6.5 acres to develop housing that will allow the road width that this property can support. Due to creek encroachment and power line easement, an estimated 64% of the property is not buildable land. The present R2 zoning will restrict development of the land. The road width required for R2 for detached single homes cannot be met on this property. R10 zoning will allow the construction of attached housing that will meet the requirements for the road width throughout the property. Those who object to my zoning request have suggested I purchase more property under the power line to widen the existing pinched area so that subdivision of detached homes could be developed. The studies required for my property rezoning does not assure me that I can meet the requirements in the creek areas of the property. R10 zoning will allow the dwelling units to consist of detached houses, townhome developments, unit ownership development, and a combination thereof, plus related amenities. The flexibility that R10 zoning will provide is essential for the development of my property. There is a Draymore Manor community of 103 townhomes located west and next door to Springdale community. The Draymore Manor Springdale communities have coexisted, sharing 11 resident property lines without disruptions for over 20 years. Yet I was confronted with an unusually strong objection by CAC and the Springdale community to my proposed development of 33 townhomes sharing 9 property lines. After 3 hearings of thoughtful deliberation by the Planning Commission, I was certified by a unanimous yes vote. The conditions I have offered will include prohibiting the construction of apartments, the setbacks, fencing, additional trees, 6 dwellings per acre instead of 10, and non-intrusive lighting conditions will reduce the density and will visually and physically isolate my proposed community from the Springdale community. Zone 10 and the conditions I have offered are consistent with the future land use and the comprehensive plan for the city of Raleigh. My development plan will be a subdivision of quality townhomes that are constructed according to the city ordinance and codes and will offer our citizens an affordable alternative to single-family homes. And I have a engineer here for answering the more technical questions that you would have, and he can explain it more because the property is very difficult to develop.
Okay, let's wait on that. We'll clock this. It was 4:55. I don't want you to use all your time. So what we'll do is ask if there's anyone else here from the public to speak in favor of this, and we'll ask the engineer questions after the other side has had their say. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone else here besides are you the engineer? Okay, we'll have you come up and answer any technical questions after we hear from the other side. Okay? Is anyone else here to speak in favor of the project or the rezoning? Okay. We are now going to go to 8 minutes. Those who would like to speak not in favor of this, again, you have 8 minutes. Do you have a spokesperson who wants to speak, or how are you going to do this?
We have 3 people to speak.
Okay.
We'll use our time wisely.
Okay.
Hello, City Council members. My name is Chris Grindstaff. I live at 9408 Dozer Run Court on the south side of the property in question. The City of Raleigh zoning guidelines state that R10 will normally be located on a major thoroughfare and adjacent to commercial development. The rezoning parcels in question check none of the boxes for multifamily townhome development. It would be hard, if you've been there, it would be hard to find a more isolated location anywhere in North Raleigh. Every existing and planned townhouse community in the area is located on Leesville Road. This location is not near transit or shopping, and it's not walkable to anything. It's not near any significant roadway because, as you saw on the map, it's currently landlocked. There's no existing or planned sewer. All 460 homes that are in the neighborhoods adjacent this island are all on private septic. It's not walkable. There are no transits, no activity centers, no sidewalks. This property is surrounded on every side by low-density single-family residential homes. That matches what the designation of this area is, and the future land use map designates it as low-density residential. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, name and address for the record, please.
I'm Gemma Grindstaff. I also live at 9408 Does Run Court. We're married.
But how tall are you?
Shorter than he is.
Okay.
So you guys are probably much more familiar with this future land use map than I am, so forgive me if I'm saying things that you already know better than I do. But according to the city planning staff report that Bynum covered, this rezoning request is inconsistent with 3 significant aspects of the future land use map. The Planning Commission's recommendation to approve this rezoning request does not consider our neighborhood's values and priorities, nor the city's foundational principle that neighborhoods matter. First, policy LU 8.3, conserving, enhancing, and revitalizing neighborhoods. Our homes are situated on large wooded lots. We chose to live here because we love the trees and we love the space. Our official zoning designation is R4, however, we actually average 1 home per acre. R10 would represent a 6-fold increase in density. Second, there's policy LU 8.5, conservation of single-family neighborhoods. The applicant has been clear that she intends to build townhomes, and this is a pretty straightforward contradiction of the policy. And then finally, there's policy LU 8.12, infill compatibility. I had to learn what infill was before I could give you this presentation. But this is the one that I think is the most relevant because the property is directly sandwiched in between our 2 neighborhoods, Springdale Gardens and Springdale Estates. And to be compatible with those surrounding neighborhoods, and here I'm quoting, the proposed development should have heights, setbacks, and massing consistent with the adjacent structures. To use our home as an example, we're set back from the road by about 70 feet and from each of our neighbors by roughly 100 feet. And while we appreciate the applicant's proposed setbacks of 30 feet, these are a far cry from the existing land use and building architecture. So we in Springdale Gardens and Springdale Estates share a unique rural quality, even though we're in a suburban neighborhood. And we would welcome new neighbors who want to join in this lifestyle, but we're opposed to any rezoning request that undermines the established character of our community. Thank you.
I'm Kirk Stull, 8837 Woody Hill Road in Springdale Estates. We have quality infill development going on all around us, and it's been going on for 15 years. We're used to change. Every one of these developments is following the future land use plan and the zoning category established by that plan. If it's zoned R4, they build R4. If it's zoned commercial, they built us Raleigh's newest Publix. Now Z2319 comes along, and it seems like we're trying to change the rules to benefit one property owner without really giving any regard to the surrounding properties and the neighborhoods. The very first legally required public meeting on this project was held over Memorial Day weekend last year. The same planning staff that allowed that meeting to be held on a holiday weekend then followed up with a report that kind of dismissed the neighborhood considerations as not really being that important. We'll plant a few extra trees and everything will be fine. So the Planning Commission followed the staff recommendation and a general directive from council to increase density. So how could they not approve it? But the issues are so complex, it took 4 planning commission meetings to finally get to a vote. Throughout this journey, the topic of compromise has come up many times, and the commission told us to meet with the applicant and try to work something out. And that's when we started talking about what we call the shoe, which is a small piece of property from one of the adjacent residential lots that's entirely under the power lines. That would have opened up the pinch points that make a normal subdivision street difficult to construct. So to be clear, though, that offer was declined. R4 was determined not acceptable. So here we are, 7 meetings and 8 months later, and the request is still R10 and townhomes. So in the 8 months that this has been going on, the property could have been sold many times over. But instead, we're in here doing this. And I assure you, none of us want to be involved in a conflict. But we are the ones that are going to have to live with the aftermath for years and years or even decades to come. So you've heard from the boards of both neighborhood associations that represents 460 homeowners. Steve Collins is here. He's president of the Springdale HOA, and he's been involved all along the way. We held a CAC meeting in October that was attended by 225 people. 217 voted against. Little did we know this topic of CACs would be so popular tonight. We filled up this room 5 times now, and the developer of Pine Hollow Estates weighed in. This is way more than just not in my backyard, and it goes beyond just neighborhoods. It's a Leesville community issue. We don't believe this is the appropriate place for dense urban development. All of that aside, we think that the facts, the land use regulations, and common sense all point to the exact same conclusion. We ask that you deny this rezoning.
Okay, thank you. Would you like your engineer to come up now? Speak, okay. So this would be 5 minutes left on the clock? Okay.
And I'm 5'8", formerly 5'9", just to get that out.
The shrinking syndrome, right? Yeah.
I'm just here to talk about the reason why we went with R10. There's an exhibit that you can see on the screen.
If you could just give your name and address for the record.
I always forget. Tim Now. I will live at 4244 Fawn Lily Drive in Wake Forest. Is that? I gave you my height, so I'm good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right.
you're
so
good.
If you look at the exhibit on the left, this is where the subdivision to the north is going to be coming in. And for us to connect it and try to get through the property, you can see we can't do it as it is now, but if you see the creek, that's the big problem. It would probably wipe out like 170 or 180 feet of creek just to get it around, which I'm not a soil or a wetlands expert, but I know it's going to be somewhere in the hundreds of thousands to probably have that done. So what we tried to do with the property owner is to try to find a solution where she can get to the western part of her property. And that's where we came up with townhomes, because townhomes don't have to have their frontage on a public street. They can have it in HOA property that's connected to a public street versus a single family house, which requires all their frontage to be right at the right of way. And so we were just brainstorming, trying to figure out a way to get her property to work, and that's how we came up with it. And you can see with a 20-foot road going through there, we still get into a little bit of the buffer, but we're not taking out the creek. So we're trying to keep it feasible. Any questions for me?
I just have one question, because I've heard why not go with, I hear this in the creek. Can you clearly explain, other than the road, is there any other reason single-family homes wouldn't work?
No, I don't. I mean, that was the reason we did it. So
But it's
we can
because
get
of the
there's
road in our code.
It's a landlocked parcel. So
Exactly.
it was the only way to get over there.
Okay.
That was going to be my question, and I may have missed this, but how is this going to connect to a public road? Is there, you're going to, with the subdivision?
Yeah, the subdivision to the north, you can see this little sketch here, but there's a road that'll come up from Strickland Road that'll come down, and it'll stop at the creek. So we're going to put the private road, if you want to say that, and connect it to the public road. And that way, everybody will have it'll meet the requirements. Once again, townhomes can be on HOA property. They don't have to be, they don't have to have street frontage. They just need to have access.
Is there any other questions?
I have one.
Councilor Cox?
Does the density have to be 39 units?
Well, right now, I think it's just under 5 units per acre. I'm not sure of the total. It's, what happens when you do these yield plans, you always start out with a great idea. And then when you go through the pre-application conference, usually you wind up losing some. So I doubt that it'll be 5 units per acre. I think it will probably be less than that, just because that's what happens when you go to the pre-submittal conferences. They tell you what you can't do, not what you can. So, did I answer your question?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Councilor Buffkin?
This may be better for staff. I've got a couple questions. About the creek and the watershed. Is this in the watershed?
That's right. So the watershed overlay technically stops at Strickland. And your question about access, so this is Strickland, and the public street for the project to the north will come down like this, and so that's how she would be taking access for public access. So not in the watershed overlay.
Understood. Thank you. That's helpful.
My water friends would tell me everything is in a watershed, so.
And then about the creek, I'm aware that Haresnipe Creek is along a future greenway easement, and part of it has a greenway now. Mm-hmm. Is there a plan for a greenway at this part of the creek?
I can look.
Thank you.
They're saying yes.
It is.
It is. Thank you.
I looked at Jason.
Well, if I may, just to follow up then. How does the greenway relate to this bridge that's going to go in to access the property? I know those weren't your drawings, but has there been any conversations about how the greenway and the bridge interact?
I don't know that Ms. McClellan's engineer has talked with Greenway staff about that. Have you had any conversation there?
No, but I can tell you that it would just connect to the road. It would whatever side of the creek it's on, it would just connect to the road. We're at the top of the water. If you look at that blue line up there, we're pretty much at the top of the watershed area.
So
I don't know what the plans are.
right, so they'd have to dedicate a greenway easement, and a similar easement has been asked of the development to the north, that the gentleman to the north represents. So they've made they're required to make a similar dedication on their side.
Are there any other questions? Okay, Councilor Knight, this is your district.
Yes.
Is there any comment you would
Yes, I'd
like to make?
comment. Thank you. So the request before us is to rezone 2 currently landlocked parcels, which are located outside the city limits, but within the city's ETJ, from R2 to R10 with conditions. I visited the site actually on Monday, got my shoes muddy, to get a better sense of the area. It's a beautiful piece of wooded property with a creek and other elements, including easements and significant topographical slope that we've been talking about that I imagine will present a number of challenges in developing a workable site plan. I've met with Dr. McLennan and learned from her about the history of this site and respect what she is trying to do with the property she inherited from her family. This history is really remarkable, and I want to support Dr. McLennan in her efforts to use the property in a way that she believes would be a fitting tribute to her family. I understand the primary reason why Dr. McLennan is asking for the opportunity to allow townhouses here is the unique configuration we've been talking about of the property, which creates some technical constraints with developing the property, particularly for single-family homes. Dr. McLennan has received some early guidance that indicate the nearest part of the site is wide enough for a street type that is allowed for townhomes, but not for single-family homes. While Dr. McLennan has offered some conditions that would restrict the number of units on the parcels, this request would still represent a dramatic shift from the surrounding neighborhoods, which are zoned R2 and R4. I have spoken to representatives of the surrounding neighborhoods, and I believe they have valid concerns about the significant change as requested here, including environmental issues and character issues. At this time, I want to ask that we leave this public hearing open so that we can continue dialogue about some of the issues we talked about tonight, and about some other development scenarios that would be reasonable and in the public interest. Thank you.
Okay, so,
can you, in your action, defer to a date certain, please?
I'm sorry. For the next public hearing meeting on
In
March the 3rd, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
so that would give Dr. McLennan 30 days for some dialogue. Is that what we're thinking?
Yes. And I will be working on that.
So do we need a vote on this, or?
Yes.
If you're leaving it open, you need a vote?
Oh, to set for the date certain. You've got to move it.
But
vote
to
on the
leave it
date.
open,
Don't
we
have
don't
to vote
need
to
it.
leave it open, but you need to go ahead and set the date.
Okay, if you would like to do that,
So the March 3rd date for the next
please make a
full meeting.
motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So- Are you going to?
The microphone really had to work out tonight. Just step away. The microphone has really had to work out tonight. Yeah.
We're going to wait a second for the room to clear. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. We are committed to working to a solution that will be good for all sides. Thank you, ma'am. Okay, the next hearing is Z3019 Lewisburg Road and Kyle Drive. I'm going to try and expedite this a little bit, Bynum, if wouldn't mind. Is there anybody here? Wait a minute. I'm going to open the hearing. Is there anybody here to speak against this rezoning? Is there anybody here to speak in favor of this rezoning? So we have about 5 people here to speak in favor. Does anybody on the council have questions about this rezoning? I don't. So we're good. So would the people who want to speak in favor of this object if I close the hearing and we move for approval? Okay. So I'm going to close the hearing and I'm going to ask, okay, Councilor Cox?
Yes, this is in my district, and so I make the following motion. I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated February 4, 2020, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning amendment. This approval is also deemed an amendment to the future land use map to the extent described in the adopted consistency statement.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thank you very much. Councilor Knight's vote would count as a yes. Okay. Next, we have rezoning Z3319, 951 and 1001 Corporate Center Drive. north of the intersection with Chapel Hill Road. So I'm going to do the same thing. First off, does anybody have any questions about this rezoning? Okay. I'm going to open the hearing. Is there anybody here to speak against this rezoning at Corporate Center Drive? Is there anybody here to speak in favor of the rezoning? Raise your hand. Okay. If I close the hearing and somebody moves to, we good? Okay, I'm getting this. All right. So I'm closing the hearing.
I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated February 4th, 2020, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning amendment.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody, for kind of bearing with us. It's been a long night. We understand that. Next is rezoning Z 3419, 2920 Glenwood Drive on the east side, north of Highwoods Boulevard. Does anybody have any questions on council about this rezoning?
My only thing is, I know they're separate cases, but when you open the hearing, can she open it for both Z34 and Z35?
One at a time.
One at a time?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So I have related question. I have a question. I'm not sure which one it's about, but
Well, figure that out. I'm going to open the hearing and go through the process here. So I'm going to open the hearing on Z34, Glen Ridge Drive. I'm going to do what I did last time. Is there anybody here to speak against this rezoning? Okay. Is there anybody here to speak in favor? Okay. Well, we will find them. I think we're good. We'll let Molly, do you want to say anything, or do you just want to? Okay. Please. Haven't seen you in a long time.
Thank you.
You doing well?
My name is Bob Mulder. I live at 3116 Ward Road in the Brentwood subdivision, just around the corner from this site. And also my greetings to the council and to city staff. I'm in favor of just one thing that I would like to see, and that's a 50-foot buffer, undisturbed, no incursions whatsoever, along the people who live on Brentwood Road, Bardwell Road, and where possible on Glenridge Drive. It's a rather unusual shaped piece of property. The precedent for a 50-foot buffer was done many years ago when they built Highwoods Office Park, and there's a 50-foot buffer between Highwoods Office Park and the folks that live along Ward Road. I live on the opposite side of Ward Road, but the buffers worked out very well. So whatever can be done to have some sort of buffer would be great. We're losing a lot of trees in Raleigh, even with the 10% that are required on a 2-acre site or greater, and we need as many trees as possible. We have a very noisy area there, Capitol Boulevard, the Beltline, and the more trees we have, the better. It certainly helps with cooling and noise. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
If I may, Mayor, I would like to address
excuse me.
Mr. Mulder's concern.
I was just going to ask Molly if she wanted to respond to that.
Okay.
At all.
Oh, sure. Let's see. Are you driving? Okay, she's driving. Okay.
So Molly, how tall are you? Because I can barely see your,
5 feet.
But you're adorable, so.
They're friends.
Okay. So we did hear this request at the CAC to provide a couple of things. There were a couple of requests that were made. One was to provide a 6-foot opaque fence, and we have included that in our conditions with some wiggle room in cases where we may have tree conservation where you're not allowed to put a fence, something like that. But in other areas we would provide that fence. We also heard the request for the undisturbed 50-foot buffer. Given that this is an RX4 zoning request next to an R6 existing zoning, we do have a required neighborhood transition in this area. So that's what neighborhood transitions look like. They're a little bit complicated if you haven't really sort of worked through them before, but an RX3, and which was initially when we went to our neighborhood meeting, we actually asked, what do people prefer? We could do an RX3 with a 3-story height limit, and that actually does not require zones B and C of the neighborhood transition. Only zone A is required for that combination of zoning districts. And then we said if we did RX4, the full neighborhood transition applies. And what we heard at that meeting was, we prefer the full neighborhood transition, please go with the RX4. So that's the request that we made. So we do have the full neighborhood transition that requires a 50-foot distance from the property line to the nearest building. But within certain zones, you can have, for example, a drive aisle or parking, some limited uses there. And I can, those are some of the options you have for the zone A. So here, this is where it shows that RX4 is actually the minimum zoning district that even requires the full neighborhood transition. It applies to all the mixed-use districts when they come in contact with something like an R6. But the least difference that you can have and still have this requirement is with an RX4. So if this isn't sufficient kind of for that transition, it's hard to see where that would apply. These are the kinds of uses that that we would have, or that we could have within the neighborhood transition today, within some zones within the neighborhood transition that wouldn't be permitted within an undisturbed buffer. Just to look at the existing properties surrounding, these existing homes are fairly distant from the adjoining property line. The shortest distances from the property line to the homes are approximately 80 feet. The average is something like 100 feet, and some of them are as much as 135 feet from the property line. So it's not as though we have, in some areas where you have some neighborhoods where they've been built right up to the property line before we had neighborhood transitions. That's not the case here. So it is something that we looked at and ultimately decided we're not able to provide that here.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Cox, is
Yes.
there anything you wanted to add to that?
Yes, Mr. Mulder, you've lived in this neighborhood for a long time. Have you been behind the homes on Glenridge Drive recently?
Excuse me, can you repeat that, please?
Have you been behind the homes on Glenridge Drive?
No, I walked back there once when the hotel was in full operation. They had some stairs that went to some of the Highwoods offices, but I think the topo's not easy to live with.
That's correct. Now this weekend I went over there to meet with some of the residents, and I was able to go behind the homes. One of the homeowners, they actually just moved in December, and so they had concerns. So I went over and met with them, and they had a fence along the rear property line. They had a gate and a fence, and so I went with them, and they actually had never been behind their house through the gate. So we went through the gate to take a better look. And when you get about 30 feet from the property line, there is a tremendous drop-off, a ravine that goes way down. I mean, there's no way anyone's going to fill that with dirt. So there is that significant distance, I think, that is hard to imagine that it would be buildable because of that drop-off. And I was wondering if knowing this helps you in any way with your concern.
Well, but the steep topo like that would make sense not to disturb that area.
Right. But I think in addition to the neighborhood transition that we have in place, plus this topographical barrier, I think we probably have in place some ways of accomplishing what you're proposing.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anybody else wish to speak? Any additional questions by the council?
Yes, Mayor. I think this is probably best for Ms. Stewart. How did things shake out on the access road on the back piece of, or I guess would be the eastern edge of the property, and the pedestrian access to Capitol Boulevard?
You'll hear a bit more detail about that in the following zoning case. We do have.
I didn't want to miss my chance.
Fair enough. There's a condition about that pedestrian connection to Capitol Boulevard, and that would be required to go to either this property line, the adjoining property line here, or if there is a street in place, which is most likely, then the pedestrian connection would end at that street. Both parcels really need that connection, and obviously, given the pinch point on this parcel, they'll need to work together to accomplish that.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other? All right, I'm going to close the hearing then. Is there a motion?
Yes, I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated February 4, 2020, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning amendment.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes 8-0. All right, so now it's the next zoning case for the Z35. Do you want to ask your question now, Patrick? No, I'm kidding. Let's see. We'll do the same thing. We'll open the hearing. I know Patrick has a question. Anybody here to speak against this zoning case? Okay. Molly, why don't you come up? Whoever has, Patrick, would you like to start questions?
I think Ms. Stewart's ready to answer.
I'm ready. Well, if there is none, I will just point out very briefly that this, it may be hard for you to read right now, but there is one existing condition on the property, which is the only reason we're here. You cannot build multifamily on this parcel unless this referenced Raleigh City Code section from the old zoning code is a congregate care provision. So if you build multifamily housing today, it's required to be effectively senior housing. And so that is why we're here. That's our main goal here. We're actually staying with the same underlying district and the same height requirement. And so this is the goal. So the uses allowed today versus what's allowed to after this rezoning are not so different.
Okay. You had a question about the access road?
Yes. Could you go into some detail? I think you and I know what I'm talking about. Maybe the rest of the council doesn't, and you could probably explain it better than I could. But the idea was an access road on the west side of the property and a pedestrian access across the property to Capitol Boulevard. Is that right?
Sure. So the idea here would be, let me get to our conditions, which I believe are on here. Oh, some pictures. Okay, so just to kind of look at where we are here. So the pedestrian access was something that was required, or was requested rather, by the neighbors. They wanted to see a pedestrian connection to Capitol Boulevard. And so that would, although there isn't a specific location that's required, it's required to effectively connect here. So that is something that's in our conditions. So that will be provided. Now, as far as a vehicular access to Glen Ridge Drive, that is not in our conditions. It actually originally was, and staff asked us to take it out. And the reason for that is because on this parcel alone, we can't promise to connect it to any public street there at the rear. It requires a connection across the parcel behind, and we aren't allowed to offer that condition. However, I can tell you that in order to build the number of units needed to meet this developer's affordability goal, we actually would have to have 2 access points to get to that number under the street design manual. So it would be built even though it's not in our conditions today. And so that is likely to look something like that. And that would be a street.
And that's largely because you would have to enter into an agreement with the other property owner.
Correct.
Right.
Okay. Any other questions?
Well, I guess I'm confused. I thought the same person owned the property.
No.
Oh, 2 different property owners.
We have two different property owners. To be clear, on Z35, this site, I'm here representing the contract purchaser, Alliance Residential. And on the site behind, I'm here representing the owner of that parcel, Eagle Rock 50 LLC.
Oh, I see. Same lawyer, different owner.
It made it easier for themselves getting the same lawyer.
So
Double the fee.
was a road connection to Brentwood ever in discussion here?
The parcels simply don't connect there. Eventually, I think I've heard from city staff that they, you know, as we put in this connection over to Glen Ridge, that they would eventually be looking for that connection as that parcel redevelops.
But you're not committing to do that tonight.
They don't own it.
We don't own that property.
Thank you.
They would have to get the agreement. Okay. Any other questions? All right, I'm going to close the hearing. Is there a motion to be made?
But was there anyone else that wanted to speak in favor?
I asked, didn't I ask?
You asked if they didn't, if they wanted to speak against.
Yeah, he's right.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
No,
No question?
I got, no.
Okay, great.
Is there anybody else here who would like to speak in favor? Mr. Mulder?
So the hearing is open.
It's open.
Bob Mulder, 3116 Ward Road, Raleigh 27604. This is precisely the kind of great development that we need along Capitol Boulevard. We're going to have future bus rapid transit here. It just makes total sense. And what I'm hoping will happen is that when others in the development community see what's happening here, that they may start buying up some of those other places along Capitol Boulevard, recombining them and to put in something nice like this. The difference between good planning and bad planning is the same difference between Creedmoor Road and Capitol Boulevard. And I think I'd like to see this corridor look a little bit more like Creedmoor Road. And the only other thing is, I know there have been some complaints about the possible traffic that may happen on Glen Ridge Drive, but we have a terrible problem with traffic in Raleigh. It's going to get a lot worse because we've been sitting on our hands about transit, but this is just a drop in the bucket compared to the problems we already have, and I think we can live with it given the quality of this proposed development. And the other thing is Fire Station 11 is just around the corner from us. It was a year in the making, the renovations, and they've got now we have, in addition to the engine, we have a tiller truck, and they need to be able to get out in a hurry. So I would urge you to make sure that whenever the traffic study is done or whatever, that the fire department has adequate egress from this site. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mulder. Is there any other questions, or should I? Okay, I'm closing the hearing.
Okay. So this is in my district. This has been a hobby of mine for the past 4 years. And I've had people email me and contact me and ask for sledgehammers to tear down the hotel. So I'm going to make the following motion. And when I finish, I will see if the city manager is able to provide everybody free helicopter rides in celebration.
Oh.
So I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated February 4, 2020, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning amendment. This approval is also deemed an amendment to the future land use map to the extent described in the adopted consistency statement.
Second.
Okay.
Can I harumph instead of seconding? Like a harumph for this one.
It's a bold second.
Yes, a strong second.
Okay. I know, Councilor Cox, this has given you major headaches over many years, so I know it's with great joy that you make that motion, and I think it will be with great joy that we all vote in favor, but let's take the vote. Right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Could you do that again, Nicole? Yeah, thank you.
Councilman Cox, now we can work
Thank
on
you,
Tower
everyone.
Marketplace.
Thank you, everyone. All right, our final hearing for tonight. Z42, let's see, Norcrest Street at the north end, and then 500 feet north of West Millbrook Road. Is there, I'm going to open the hearing. Is there anyone who has lasted this long, who's still here, who would like to speak against this case? Is there anyone here who has lasted this long who would like to speak in favor of this case? If we want to approve this case, would you be okay with me closing the hearing? Is everybody, does anybody have any questions? Okay, I'm going to close the hearing. Would someone like to make a motion?
Yes, Mayor. I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated February 4, 2020, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning amendment.
Do we have a second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, passes 8-0. We are now officially adjourned. Thank you for sticking with us.